What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Don't Give Up the Shit podcast. This is episode 144. Today, I've got a cool one. It's a good one to come back on. It's been a while. This is my first podcast I've done in like 3 months or something. And it came together over a series of months where Paul Kingsbury linked me and Russ up, and we talked a little bit, and then he was going through a bit of a transition professionally and moving, I think. And so I just signed up recently, and that was kind of, it was funny. The universe was kind of nudging me a little bit, like, to get back into the podcast. Like, I just kept getting these signs, right? Like, shout out to my dude Toby. He's a coworker now, retired Navy chief, and he was a listener of the podcast while he was on active duty, and had no idea it was me because he didn't consume it on YouTube. And we were just talking about it at work and one time, and he kind of put two and two together and was like, holy shit, you're DGUTS? And I was like, yeah, man. And so I've talked to him several times about the podcast recently, and then some of the other guys at work, and it's just like made me think about it, kind of made me turn my brain back on in those areas in a way. And then a bunch of other stuff that has been like popping up that has kind of nudged me in that direction. And then out of nowhere, after having not talked to him for months, Russ made I sent him a link a while back. He went on the calendar app that I use and scheduled. So here we are talking to MCPON 15. He makes a funny joke during the podcast about being 14 and a half because he thought that was, he was just going to be an interim and that was it. And but yeah, Russ Smith, the last MCPON prior to the current, who's probably almost on his way out as well. But we retired about the same time, and it was really fun. I've always wanted to have this type of a conversation with a MCPON or a fleet, which, I mean, I've talked to Paul Kingsbury a bunch of times. He was a retired fleet, or is a retired fleet. But like, he's the only person I've ever encountered that was willing to have candid conversations with me about the types of stuff that I want to talk about. And I was, I didn't know Russ that well, prior to the podcast. We had never talked like this, just exchanged some texts. But I'm always a little apprehensive talking to people at this level because I'm always worried they're not going to talk. Like, they're not going to be forthcoming and honest. And Russ was exactly what I was hoping for. It was really fun, really good dude. And he was willing to talk about the hard things. We talked about the GW all hands call thing. We talked about he is pretty candid about his own mental health struggles. We talked about all kinds of stuff that you might think he would stay away from, or a person at his level would stay away from anyway. But now that I feel like I know him a little bit better, I'm not shocked at all that he was willing to have this type of conversation. And I think it'll be really valuable. I think it'll provide a lot of perspective for people. And the big thing for me, which I told Russ afterwards, was I wanted a goal of this episode was to kind of humanize the office and humanize the people that rise all the way up to that spot, specifically because of some of the things that happened to him while he was there, about the reaction to the all hands call thing, which I did a episode right after that happened, defending him for the most part, because it was a human moment, and the way the internet reacted was kind of bullshit because he didn't even say what he was being accused of saying. It was kind of like a perfect storm of circumstances and all this stuff that he just stepped on a landmine, and it was an accident. It wasn't something that, it wasn't meant the way it was interpreted at all. Plus, he didn't even say what everybody accused him of saying. So anyway, it was super fun to get the insight He's a really thoughtful, introspective dude, and I think you'll get a lot from this episode. So I really hope you enjoy it. So yeah, man, thank you so much for doing this. I'm pumped to be able to ask you questions that no one else can answer because, you know, there's only been so many people in that job. But first, most people that listen to this podcast, if not all of them, know who you are, but we can start with just like your background and bio, because I am really interested in not just understanding like life as the MCPON, but I want to talk to you about like what was like life leading up to that. What was your career like? Some of the misadventures maybe, and definitely like touch on like that. I've known a few ISs. I actually had a cook when I was at my first shore duty that he got force converted for some reason as an IS-2. And so we got to hang out with him a little bit, but he wouldn't tell us anything. So we're just like, hey man, what's it like to be an IS? So I'm curious about like that life, or, you know, obviously you can't say everything, but what that's like, and kind of how, like your career leading up to the point where you're a higher level CMC.
Yeah. So, Russ Smith, 34, just short of 35 years in the Navy. Loved every minute of it. My plan coming out of high school was to go to college, and I was going to go to school at a small school in the Northeast, play soccer, really enjoy myself, be a poli-sci major. And a very personal tragedy loss for me meant that I needed to get away because I didn't want my life to look like that.
Yeah.
And didn't even know, you know, as I said in a few all hands calls and other places, I didn't even necessarily see a place in the world for me. I was looking for a reason to stick around. And 2 years into the Navy with my hands as a WT inside a B-43Y1 nuclear bomb, and the ability to remove the city of San Francisco from the map should it accidentally go off. I felt like I had a purpose because the Navy, despite my tumultuous start, trusted me enough with that responsibility at that young age with the training they gave me. And I thought, this is for me. And to be honest, I had a few moments where I thought about getting out. At the 6-year point, diving and shooting and driving boats at a SEAL team, I was like, why would I ever stop?
Why would I ever quit this job?
And then at 20, I thought about, you know, getting out and going up to McLean, Virginia, and working for another agency of government. And I did a year as the acting CMC at the Navy staff with Captain Bill Moran as the deputy director of the Navy staff. And I thought, no, this is what drives me, people. And so I divorced myself from the IS rate and became a CMC. And except I didn't. I stayed very close to my IS roots. And at the end, when we talk about transitions, I'll tell you why that matters to me today.
Yeah.
But I got engaged and married to somebody who, right at that 20-year point, who was tied to DC because she was a lobbyist. And you know, with $1 million a year career in her future, taking her away from DC was not smart. So I thought when I came back to DC to the Office of Naval Intelligence to be the CMC after I left Momsen, I thought, well, this is it. And every tour I had after that, it was Rick West said, hey, can you come over to the Navy staff? I need a CMC here. Mine's retired. And Willie Klaus had relieved me as the acting, so we knew each other. And I did. And I thought, what better way to go out than being on the Navy staff and having a chance to see how the Navy is truly run, how you know, the building of the Navy of tomorrow, which is what the CNO and the staff does. That's their primary objective. And so I got to see that. And I was going to off track and go to a Army Special Mission Unit for my last 3 years. And it fell apart literally at the last second. And the Naval Academy came up and Wes said, why don't you go out there? So I applied and I thought, and I got the job. And I was like, what an amazing job to get to grow the kind of officers that you want to work for in the Navy and the Marine Corps for the next 40 years. There can't be a better job for the 300 enlisted that are out there at the Academy. And then I thought that was it. And then one day, April Beldo said, "Hey, are you interested in this job?" And I was like, "Fix everything that I hated about being a sailor."
Yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah.
So, yeah, I was so.
That's
I
awesome.
didn't think I'd get the job, but I got hired by Admiral Burke, and I was built for N1. Policy, taking big policy, explaining to sailors. That to me was the best job on the planet. And aside from growing new officers in the Navy and Marine Corps, best job I ever had in the mainstream Navy was doing that. And I thought I was going to retire out of that job. I was not. I'd been, Navy staff, Annapolis, back to the Navy staff. Who picks a guy like that for MCPON? Paul Kingsbury coming out of Norfolk as the Fleet Forces Fleet Master Chief, or I actually thought Ray Kemp was it. And Richardson.
I thought April Beldo was going to be MCPON for sure, and then
so
Giordano got in there.
Either April or Suze Whitman, and
Suze would have been great too. I love her.
I love Suze, and either one of them would have been an amazing choice. Only Admiral Richardson will be able to tell you why he made the choices he made. And I'll tell you,
aged like milk, to be fair.
He's a very deliberate thinker, and the choices he makes are very thought out. And
I've dealt exclusively with 1120 nuclear trained engineers as like my CO's department. Yeah, I mean, so like I don't know him personally, but I know a lot of dudes like him, and so I have a pretty good idea of how he makes decisions, I think. But he's
a very, very, very smart guy. I was not expecting the call. I actually was excited about being able to say I got to be the acting dude. 14.5.
14.5.
So I didn't expect the call when I got it, and I actually told Admiral Richardson, I think we can just wait to pick somebody. You don't need an acting MCPON. We play a pretty good zone defense amongst the 4 Fleet Masters.
Yeah.
And we had a great group with Jim and first Suze, then Jim, and then with Raymond and with Paul. Paul was the super analytical thinker.
Yep.
Suze was the very passionate and gregarious and compelling, advocate and cheerleader and just amazing person, the hugger. And then you had me and Ray Kemp as the bridgers, kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
But we had a great group. And he said, you guys talked me out of getting rid of Chiefs Initiation. I want a belly button. That's about to start. And if you can't do it, I was like, no, that's fine. I'll do it. So, but I did not expect the call when I got it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like a cold start. I looked at Toby Ruiz and I said, "Hey, bro, want to come with me? Because I need some help."
Yeah, and I fucking love Toby.
A great job, to do that for me. And we went over and started out, and it
was Toby your EA?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So fly by the seat of our pants, figuring it out day by day. I felt like I had to travel a bit to reconnect sailors in a way that maybe they hadn't felt enfranchised, and I did it just by being who I'd been at N1. And because I could speak to policy, which is 90% of what sailors are asking about, I knew that, and I knew the people because I'm, N1 for life. So if I had a question, I call back. And
well, and that's what I was going to say when you were mentioning why would you pick a guy from N1 to be the fleet or MCPON? It's like, that's why, because you're probably uniquely qualified to do that job because of the questions that are going to get asked. It's like, you're going to have a deeper well of knowledge and experience to pull from in that area. So, go ahead.
No, that was love the opportunity.
What's life as an IS like general? Like, you don't have to deep dive on it, but I've always been curious about what does an IS even do? Like, I've known a few, I was on a flag staff when I retired. So we had reservists that were on active orders. So my friend Lindsay was an IS chief and a couple others that would hang out there. But they're just in the skiff. And then when they're not in the skiff, they're doing chief things with me, but we're not talking about what she does, obviously. So what do ISs do exactly?
So this is going to sound parochial.
That's fine.
But ISs, And we provide intelligence products and services to customers. Intel. It's hard to remind people of that sometimes in the Intel community, but you're not the consumer necessarily. You're the service provider, and giving somebody advanced knowledge, an idea of what they're going to face with the red threat. That's the crux of the job. Now we do it. One of the coolest things about being an IS is you can do it in so many different environments. There are so many ways to operationally support. In my time, it was aviation and NSW. Most of it, even when I was involved with aviation, it was supporting NSW, and frankly grew into some. I mean, we can talk about NEIC and how that became what it is and all that other stuff. But ISs have a great opportunity to integrate with every warfare community and every climb and place, and are even now on occasionally getting onto submarines. So.
Yeah, we always had a bunch of CTs come on deployment with us, but I never had any ISs that I'm
something
aware of.
Very different. Cryptologists and your ACIT writers do very niche things in that environment. ISs have not historically gotten involved in that, but now, the greater need for intelligence closer and closer to the tip of the spear, it necessitates, what we did. We grew the 3912 NEC, which was, and the combat support NEC that they have at Dev Group, because we had people who had to be of a certain shape and capabilities to support operational forces. It doesn't make you a SEAL, but it means that if you have to go along and help them with something very unique, you're not going to fall behind. You're not going to become a liability to the group. So
I had a buddy that he was a submarine radioman, but he went and did it was like a comms unit that supports special forces, and so he went to he went to ranger school and jump school and all kinds of crazy, and he was like the type of dude that was in shape that he could keep up. So like he loved it though. He got to do all the cool guy stuff, but like wasn't actually a SEAL or whoever else he was working with. All right, so I'm curious next. So like you mentioned, let's go on to what you mentioned earlier. So like, how has the transition been for you? Because I've spent a lot of time thinking and talking about this lately, because I retired in September 22, and I've had a hell of a time adjusting. And I'm pretty sure I've been retired longer than you, and I feel like I'm just now in probably the last like 3 or 4 months. I'm just now starting to find my footing and like feel like I'm somewhat assimilated, or at least have my hands mostly around being a civilian, and like my mood's a lot better. I'm happier in daily life. I'm able to appreciate things more. Like there was just this weird period where I was either like emotionally muted, or which that had something to do with some medication that I'm taking for mental health things, but the either emotionally muted or just like down, like depressed or anxious or whatever. Like I'm diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and I have sleep issues and all this stuff, but like it was really difficult to like find, because I thought when I retired, like I had my best friend Pat was a nuke mechanic on my first submarine, and then he got out, and he asked me, he came out for the wedding because me and my wife got married a few years before I retired, and he asked me at like a pre-wedding dinner, he goes, what are you going to do when you're done in the military? Because like, I know you, and I know you well enough to know you need purpose and fulfillment. And I don't see how you're going to get it at the level you're getting it from being this senior chief, master chief guy in the Navy outside of the Navy. Like, what are you going to do to get that? And I thought the podcast was going to be that, because I've been doing this for like 10 years and I've had a lot of really cool circumstances arise. Like I've made a lot of great friends. Got to make impacts in ways I never thought were possible. And like I had a lot of really cool moments as a little over a decade as a chief, getting to make those impacts in real life. But having the reach of the internet, it's like I've gotten emails out of the blue about, chiefs going, man, you completely changed my outlook on being a chief and I'm reinvigorated and blah, blah, blah. Just really cool messages and just evidence of an impact. And so I thought this would be it. And I found that it scratches the itch a little bit, but it doesn't like fill that hole. And then on top of that, it was hard because of the mood and just the me trying to figure out how to assimilate. It was like I wasn't I wasn't like motivated to do it at all either. So I've taken long breaks. Like this right now is me coming off like a 3-month break. And so I wonder, just like, what's the transition been like for you? What surprised you about it? Because I was pretty shocked by the things I didn't expect. And I thought I thought I had done a good job of like mentally preparing myself for it. I talked to a lot of guys that retired, and I did a lot of self-reflection and thought about it. I consider myself a very self-aware person, but like I was just, there were some big gaping holes in my forecast of what it was going to be like. So just kind of like share, like, what's the experience been like for you, and what have the hurdles been? And
well, first of all, I think doing a podcast is definitely one way you can stay connected. You know, Sean Isbell does one called Right With Is, and I know he has quite the reach with that show he does. All the trappings that come with being, as Dave Twyford used to lovingly say, you're Navy famous, not famous. It is. I was happy to shed that notoriety. I never really sought that job. That wasn't something that interested me. What I thought you could do in that job, I didn't think the pain you go through in doing it was worth it to me. And I always wanted to be the EA. And so, because you could whisper in the MCPON's ear, you could influence things like a humaner, but no one's writing, newspaper articles about you. But the giving up all of that was the easiest thing I ever did. And what's funny is a lot of people think when we transition that, especially for more senior people, they're not famous anymore. No one's bringing them coffee. Nobody brought them coffee anyway.
Right.
But the struggle for me was that I had a job where I understood my purpose, and I felt like I was consequential to the story. I very carefully sought out the company that I wanted to work for, and it took me a while. I chased a veterans group, or a group that was going to do housing for veterans. And they used to do military housing. They had a great pedigree and resume. They started out doing housing at Penn State in the 90s and had a good track record. And they strung me along for about 10 weeks, almost 3 months.
Damn.
And Admiral Moran and I both were going to work this together. And then they just, one day I said, look, I've got to eat. If you can't write a contract, I'm out of Schlitz, and because it's expensive in San Diego. And they said, let us think about it. And they said, never mind. And they shut it all down. And I was like, what am I going to do now? So I pursued another big box retailer and thought, after a while, I don't want to give up my soul to work for them. And so I found Booz Allen, and I thought that their core values aligned with mine, and they do. They're a great company. I just left Booz Allen last week after my first year because I felt frustrated, and no fault of Booz Allen's. I had the greatest EVP in the world, Jenny Brooks, who tried to figure out creative ways to leverage me. But it's a big company. There's a lot going on. And they were not unhappy with me. I was unhappy with the fact that I didn't feel consequential to what was happening at Booz Allen. And it's hard, in a company of 40,000, being part of a cadre of 4 that serve the Navy and the Marine Corps team. You're just not going to find that same level of satisfaction in the Navy. And so I, over objection, said, I'm sorry. I love what Booz Allen did for me in helping me understand a little bit more about what industry's really like. But I felt like I couldn't do that. And, I think I've settled on a smaller company that I like, that I'm going to help Native Chat or Native Tech. Spending a year or a lifetime in the Navy, operating overseas and with foreign partners, what better way to work with a very small company that does language services and helps any number of partners talk to each other instantaneously and be clearly understood because they're doing it in their own language. Star Trek,
like translation,
Star Trek Universal Translator, was a thing and only in chat at this point, but if
Yeah.
it was a thing, this is that. And
Okay.
It's nice that I maintain my connections to my prior life and prior community because of who some of the first customers that I'm starting to figure out would be customers of this company. And I've got people I can talk to there, both the Navy and a little up north. So I'm grateful that I've had the journey I've had.
Yeah.
But my journey was not a struggle because of the trappings of celebrity. Quite the opposite. It was because I didn't feel like I was finding my way to fit in. And to be honest, when I talk to other vets, I feel like that's our common story. Because we're just trying to figure out where we fit, you know?
Yep.
So
you feel like an alien. Like I when I got out, I spent a couple of months not doing anything, but I told myself, I came up with a plan with my therapist that I was seeing on active duty to like take some time off. I was like, I'm going to take like 6 months off and just do nothing, just decompress. And he's like, he basically thought it was a good idea because I was a workaholic the whole time I was in the Navy. I was redlining the whole time. And he's like, when's the last time you really took time off? Like, why do you think it's a bad idea to slow down? And I was like, I don't know, never. Cause I would even when I took PCS leave, that was my time to catch up on normal life. Like I was doing house projects and fucking like doing all the things that I didn't have time to do, go visit people, blah, blah, blah. And so you don't really ever stop. And so I was like, I was going to take a break. And then I had a job kind of fall into my lap with a contractor that was developing CS training. And I was just going to be a subject matter expert, help them develop training. And then after that first 9-month contract, I'd get into like instructional design for other rates for the Navy and they would utilize me that way. And I'm like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And it was fully remote work from home. I'm like, this is okay, let's do it. And then the contract fell through because the Navy side wasn't ready for whatever reason. So I felt the need to like plug that hole with something, like do something else, because that's just how my brain works. Instead of just, hey, why don't you take a break like you were fucking supposed to? And so I didn't. And so I immediately was like, I'll go to school. I'll just go to school. And so I started at UW Tacoma doing psychology. And it was cool because it gave me something to do with my hands. And I enjoy it's like a natural evolution of my being obsessed with leadership development. It's like psychology is a huge part of that. It's kind of like the reasons behind everything come from psychology. So I was really interested in it too. But when I got to school, it's just like, one, it's an undergraduate program. So it's all these babies. Like I'm in Psych 101 with a bunch of like 18, 19 or 20-year-old people. And I'm 40. And so I'm just like, Jesus, it's like the Billy Madison or whatever. I think it's Billy Madison, the meme about using your GI Bill. But like, it was also just weird because nobody understood. Like nobody, I didn't feel connected to anyone there. And I remember there's a student vet center on campus and I just walked up there and it was like, I walked in the room and just saw the kid and he was like this Army vet that was maybe in his early 30s. And it was just like, I immediately was just like, my people. Like, I was just like, I just felt like connected. I'm like, you're my like species. And so it was immediately like comforting because I was getting kind of like weirded out and anxious about everything because I'm just like, I don't belong here. Like, this is strange. And I felt, God.
No, I was going to say, you said something at the beginning. You said what surprised me. I had a interview with somebody for a job when I was still looking, and 11 hours of interviews over about 3 weeks. Back and forth. What would I do? How would I execute? I love it. I love a great plan. I can't wait to get you on the team. Yeah. And then the night before he wanted me to call in and talk to his executive board with a scenario. And basically it was, here's a letter I got from a client. It's a real letter I got 10 years ago. You're going to call and tell the board what you thought. And then everything you do through the end of the meeting with the first meeting with the client. I said, okay. When he calls to give me the scenario, he goes, hey, my CFO is a retired Army 06 and he was looking through your resume and, happened to notice, where did you get your bachelor's degree? I said, I don't have one. And he went, how's that possible? I said, 17 of my first 21 years were on sea duty. And, I'm not excusing anything. I'm saying I prioritize towards mission requirements and what I love doing, which was sailors and work. And he started to speak. And I said, hey, I did have a conversation with N8. You're not going to have a problem billing the government for services at a wage that's, you're going to be able to compensate me for what I'm worth. He was like, yeah, okay, I guess it makes sense. So I did the interview. That CFO was like, no fucking way. Said, you don't have a mandate to lead without a bachelor's degree. Being a math sheet doesn't mean anything except that you're good at heads and beds and personnel inspections. And I went, okay, you clearly don't know what Navy math sheets do.
Yeah, you clearly don't know what.
So well,
you weren't just a Navy Master Chief, to be fair. Like, you were there's a whole gulf of difference between like what I got to do. Like, you were leading literally everyone, ostensibly, but then like
towards self-deprecation, but I will say
same.
The difference between a CMC at any level is just it's the scope of who you're answering to. That's it. It's My boss was a 4-star at the end, but I have the same problems with my boss as a guy who's working for an 05. They're just on a different scale. That's all.
Right. That's fair.
You do gain experience through the additional years in doing the jobs.
Right. Right.
So also, I just kind of looked at him and I said, all right, fine. The 6 members of the board were not enough. That one guy who was a founding partner mattered more. And so he called me and he said, hey, if we have extra work, we'll give you a buzz, but I think we're going to go in a different direction. I was like, okay. A little bit of career advice. Okay, sir. He goes, if you're gonna give people advice, you need to at least have a bachelor's degree. And I said, okay. And then he talked for a good 5 minutes, and he paused and he goes, is any of this a surprise to you? I said, yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
Really? I said, yeah. I said, if I didn't have the last 2 jobs I had, I could see you underestimating me. I'd still be the same person, but I could see why you would underestimate what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
But I had those last 2 jobs.
Right.
That should tell you that I at least have it figured out, that I know how to give advice to senior executives, how I can, I'm pretty good at efficiencies and organizational leadership. I said I can, all the things you've already asked me about, and I've told you what I would do and you love, and suddenly now you don't because I don't have a bachelor's degree.
Right.
And I just said, for a company that calls itself the word innovations in their title, I said that's not very innovative when you're behind the federal government and hiring practices who got rid of a bachelor's degree in June of 2020 as a prerequisite for employment. Yeah. And he was furious. He hung up. I hung up. And I just went, I called a friend who runs a university, and she helped me get in. And I'm now 6 out of 10 classes done. Actually, my finals due this week.
Nice.
And then I got 4 more classes to take.
Yeah, so. Dude, I didn't get a bachelor's degree until my very last tour. Like, I was on shore duty at Submarine Group 9, and it was like, I'm going to get an online bachelor's degree in organizational leadership so I can check the box on job applications that says I have a bachelor's degree. And that was the only reason I did it, was because I had been like doing a little research on the types of jobs that I might want to do. And a lot of it was federal work, like doing the stuff that I kind of ended up doing just as like a bridge to me getting to where I wanted to be as a therapist. But it was like everything, the prereq was a bachelor's degree at minimum. And so I'm just like, okay, well, I'll just get a bachelor's degree in something. And then did a organizational leadership one at Excelsior online as I was finishing my last shore duty, just because I was like, I know I'm going to need this eventually. And at the time I was still on the fence about going to be a cob, and because I wanted to be a CMC. And then I had a whole misadventure with brain cancer and a bunch of other stuff that like basically got me to, okay, wheels are falling off the wagon. It's time to go home, But
have you seen that ad for Indeed where the woman's like, so the only reason I'm not qualified is I don't have a bachelor's degree? Yep. So I can have a bachelor's degree in anything. Underwater basket weaving. And he goes, yep. And she goes, what was your degree in? He goes, dance.
And it's like, what? How is that relevant to anything? And like, why would that make me a better candidate? Because like, the thing that shocks me about that scenario you just shared was, I would expect that stance out of a civilian. I would not expect it out of an Army 06. Like, I would not expect it out of someone that served in the military and understands the value of senior NCOs. Like,
remember, we talk about being a chief and what it means. if you're bad to somebody, they will never forget it, and it will taint the way they see the world. And I got to imagine one of his sergeant majors somewhere let him down. But the boss actually had been an SES in the Navy for a minute and was an executive coach for a while to some senior 4-stars, and he should have known better. But
that's
he let stupidity rule his day.
Yeah,
that surprised me. That aspect of transition surprised me.
Yeah, and it like what's interesting to me too is that like it's as frustrating. You mentioned something before we started recording too about you were talking about ethics and how we didn't, like we don't get any formal ethics training, and like that almost verbatim is how I've argued the reason why I do this podcast, except replace ethics with leadership development and education. It's like throughout the entire life cycle of a sailor's career, they get no formal leadership development and education outside of the senior enlisted academy. You can make an argument for chief's initiation. I don't really feel like there's formal leadership development and education that happens there, but I could understand why somebody would like, and just more because the season experience can be of such varying quality and composition that it's like, it's not a reliable source. There's no uniformity, even though I feel like there should be, but we can get to that later. But like the whole argument being like, if we don't get any of that throughout the life cycle of our career, how are we expected to be good at it? And the argument I always make is like, I stood diving officer watch on a submarine the last 3 years I was in, right? And it's like the most senior enlisted watch station on a submarine. You're responsible for ship safety and ships control. It's like, it's a big deal. You would not put me in that position without being fully qualified and trained, right? So why the fuck are we putting people in leadership positions without them being fully qualified and trained? And then I make the argument about the selection criteria being erroneous because I sat the 7 board before I retired. And so like, not a ton of experience, but I got that glimpse, and it made me feel even more conviction in that, like, we're selecting for like potential to lead versus like actual demonstrated leadership ability, even though there are some metrics by which we can measure that. It's like, most of it is like, you checked all these individual performance boxes and you're doing a good job as an individual performer. So we're going to be like, it somehow logically follows that you're going to be a good leader of people and be selfless and be humble and all the things. Like none of the whole process up to that point is a selfish pursuit of promotion. And then once you get there, we're like, okay, now we need you to be this humble servant leader. And then the chief season, I don't feel like is a great tool for accomplishing that. But as far as like the you being ready on the outside, it's like when you do get through all this, even though we don't get that formal leadership development and education, a lot of people, it's like you have more leadership experience at what I would argue is probably the highest level of leadership, just because of the circumstances and like what's at stake if you screw it up. That like when you come out the other end of that, I'm forever going to be on my bully pulpit about leadership development and education, how we need to take it more seriously and put more resources into it and all those things. But like, you still come out the other end of that in a very unique position with qualifications you can probably only get from this pipeline, like the military service pipeline, to be in a position to lead, advise, coach, whatever, in what it sounds like the position you're applying for. So like the idea that you're somehow not qualified because you don't have a fucking bachelor's degree in whatever the fuck you felt like majoring in blows my mind. And it smacks of what I feel is the incompetence had at the highest levels of the Navy and the military by not taking leadership development and education as seriously as they should. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about like people holding the purse strings. Like, it's like, I know that if you had a magic wand and were able to spend all the money you want, that there'd probably be half a dozen senior enlisted academies, and there'd probably be like a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other resources.
So the Navy is horrible about spending what I call non-causal dollars, meaning ship hits something, we sit down, we reflect, we retool, we spend, and we fix.
Yeah.
Until that happens, the first question when you say, I need to grow the Senior Enlisted Academy, I need to make it, Mike Stevens is the first guy to have the idea. Let's make it mandatory. And let's infuse it, make it a little bit more substantial, and then let's make it a requirement. The first question is, what are we trying to fix? What's broken right now? What's not getting done on the fleet? It's like, but you don't know how much faster this organization can go and run. And when you professionalize the group even further, by adding additional opportunities for training, education, and reflection, you get better. And we'll never realize that if you're always saying, what's broke, what are we fixing?
Right, but is no one ever making the argument that the causal link is like when you examine the Fitzgerald and McCain collisions, or when you examine any other leadership failure when somebody's on the cover of the Navy Times, or when you examine like programmatic failures, it's like I would accept the challenge of anyone that I could connect that to leadership failure 100% of the time. So it's like, that's the cause, like that's your causal reason to fund the Senior Enlisted Academy expansion or the NLEC ELD expansion or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, the two best leaders that most directly champion it because they were in the jobs to do it, Admiral Kyle Kozad was the guy who said, sure, I'll take the Senior Enlisted Academy out from underneath the War College and give it a home here at NETSI. And then, yes, I will take on, because I said the baby's ugly. It comes with a $750,000 bill to professionalize the building, Talmadge Hall, so we can accommodate 220 students per class.
Yeah.
He said, I'll do it. Then when I had to go hat in hand to Admiral Pete Garvin and say, sir, I'm sorry, that bill has doubled. Please, for God's sakes, pay the bill. He goes, I said, could you take a few days to think about it? He said, I don't need time to think about it. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. Tell him to go. Keep going.
Hell yeah.
Said, all right. We've had good people. Moran, Burke, Naval, Cheeseman. These are all people who have championed enlisted development.
Yeah.
But we're competing against N9 and warfare integration and weapon systems and new class of ship. And the things, the Navy is a very symbiotic service. We're a STEM service. We rely on the equipment we use to fight. Yeah. And it does deserve, in my last testimony, when I was getting raked over the coals a bit by Wasserman Schultz, I said, and she said, don't you want to spend more money on barracks? I said, yes, I will, every day and twice on Sunday. But Admiral Gilday has the very difficult job of saying, I do want more barracks, but if it costs me 2 more destroyers, and now everybody's deployment is going to be 10 months instead of 8 months or 7 months, or am I even going to be able to get people to join the Navy? Yeah. It's not as easy as people think, and people don't understand the trade-offs unless you've been in that space.
Right.
And I know that, Richardson, when he was CNO, and Gilday, when he was CNO, agonized over, I know what I want to do, but what do I have to do so that sailors have the equipment that they need to fight? And
why isn't there either, or like, I'll say why isn't there because I don't perceive it to be true, but also like, is there even an appetite for like more transparency about that reality that that you and Richardson and everyone else are agonizing over these hard decisions, that where they're effectively triaging what they can do based on how much money they have. And so because if you're not transparent about it, then I get to fill in the gap of the unknown of, oh, well, you're not building more barracks, so you must not give a shit about us, instead of, well, I'm not building more barracks because I decided that money was more important for this, because of basically what you just explained about no one wants to go. Do you want to go on 10-month deployments? I fucking know. I bet my very first Westpac was 9.5 months. And it was because we finished a 6-month Westpac and then Iraqi Freedom popped off and they're like, hey, go load some missiles and go over there.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's not fun, right? So no, I don't think anyone would pick that, but they also don't know that choice was made because there's no transparency or explanation of the decision.
Yeah. I used to get asked why I traveled so much. It's like, why do you think it's necessary to travel 280 days a year? And I said, for that very reason, because no one else is in a position to have nothing to risk and can be honest and transparent about what happens inside DC. No one else understands it that can also come out and explain it. The CNO can't do that.
Yeah.
Senior admirals can't do that. They can talk about some of the mechanics, but they can't get into the conversations I had at the Senior Enlisted Academy were some of the best and most therapeutic, because I got to work out some of my angst, and I'd say, this is the shit that I had to deal with this week testifying. And I would be very open and honest, and not one person ever burned me for the honesty I showed them, because I showed them complete transparency on what used to happen in DC. And when people ask me now, I have no idea. Jim is the guy who is the only one who can speak to that, because unless you're the guy in the job right now, you don't know enough about what you don't know outside DC that's driving some of the decisions. And so everybody likes to be very judgy, and there's lots of things that come up, and I'm just like, you got to call and ask the MCPON, because I have no idea.
So, I've always been maddened by the because I think Richardson did a podcast for a little bit, but it was like a 15-minute long nothing burger. Like, he didn't say anything that that was going to resonate with anyone. And I've always wondered why, because I feel like it would be wildly more efficient for like Jim or whoever's next to let the MC3s do what MC3s do. Let your PAO do what they do, and sit in front of a camera and have a little lavalier microphone on and just talk about it, like fireside chat, like something, man, like because you can do it from the Pentagon. You can do it from your fucking living room. I'm doing this from my house right now. And like traditionally I've had like 6-figure downloads in a 12-month period. So it's like, you can get that kind of reach, and it's not like you even have to build up an audience. Like, they're going to know, like, their social media accounts exist already. So you just put it out that way. All the other Navy accounts could share it. And then you have an enormous megaphone that's reaching sailors where they are, and they can just like be on the treadmill listening to MCPON whoever, or CNO whoever, or like CNP or any of them explaining, hey, this is the new program, this is what it means to you, this is why we did it, or this is what we're discussing today about whatever hot topic everybody's concerned about, or whatever. And I just never understood. Go ahead.
My young MC2 now, MCC, Anna Van Nuys, probably would have loved to put a camera in my face, but I used to say, I can stand up in front of 5,000 people and not bat an eye, but put one camera in front of me without an audience to connect to.
Man, you're doing great right now. What do you say?
So I've gotten better.
Okay.
In fact, I still only do it with her, but with my girlfriend, I'll actually FaceTime, which it took her probably, I don't know, 6 months to get me to do that.
To wear you down.
What if I pick my nose when we're talking? You didn't think it was. So,
that's funny.
Cameras always scared me, because there's no human faces aren't there to reflect back. You know, the just the look that says, I don't really understand. All right, let me try this a different way. You don't get that feedback, so you're just shooting in the dark. Plus, if you're watching a recording, they could be in a very different mood. You know, we had an audio recording of that, you know, the fake quote thing on GW. And we hung that transcript online. And there were people who, before they read what actually got said, no, they didn't. I don't think anybody, but they did say, you know, well, I'm sure there's other stuff. It's like, no, it's one continuous recording, jackass. It's actually.
No, dude, as soon as it happened, I had people sending me the recording from in the hangar bay. I had the transcript. I had everything. And I'm like, listening to it, I'm like, it's not even what he fucking said. He never said that. He never said lower your standards. Like, that never fucking happened.
It's so funny that I got called. So we left there, went to Dam Neck, and we were down at Dam Neck for probably 4 or 5 hours. So we come out, and Stacy, my senior PAO, calls me. She goes, hey, there's this thing that's starting to pop up on Reddit. You might want to check it out. And so she showed me the meme or the slide that said,
everywhere.
You know, lower your standards. I was like, well, I didn't say that. And I look at Jan, and she goes, you didn't say that. I said, hey, Stacy, I didn't say that. It should be easy enough. Airlant recorded it. Can we just get a copy of the recording and bring it up? And she goes, okay, you sure you don't want to address it? I'm like, nah, it's fake bullshit. So why would I?
Why would I?
Go anymore. And by 9 o'clock that night, I swear to God, the fucking house is on fire. And I called him the other day, like, can you believe this shit? He goes, it'll be fine. Just wait till Sunday. It'll all blow over. Sunday, I called Admiral Brown, and I said, sir, I know you guys are trying to get me to hold fire, but that's not me. I'm going to make a statement. He was like, okay. So I put something together. You asked in the preamble before we got started about the Facebook page. That was my page. And so, yes, the MCs that were there put some content on there, but speeches, days of, celebrations of, I wrote those things. Those are mine. I wrote my speeches. No one wrote things for me.
Was the Was the title intentional? The office of the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy instead of your...
No. To me, that's transparent. But I
wanted to give you credit for that so bad, man.
my lawyer was like, stop answering the Facebook email account. And I was like,
yeah,
it's my page. If I want to hop on there and be authentic with somebody, I'm going to do it. And they hated it. But to be fair, that is their job. They're supposed to manage it for them.
But like, I bet you the sailors you were answering loved it. So it's like, there's...
Absolutely. And I still stay in touch with several that I met through that process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like it proves my point earlier about the MCPON should have a podcast, but I'm happy to help if they won't.
MCPONs are not gods. They're human beings. They're people.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what they need to show the world via a platform like that. And until they do, it's this adversarial relationship where they're the other is like never going to change. But
so I don't mean to keep quoting him, but Richardson used to do that geometry speech. It's not you and they, it's we. And when you stop looking at somebody and saying you people or they and say it's about we because we're all in this together, it changes the way you see questions and solutions.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment. I just feel like it's the responsibility of the people in the higher level positions to to bridge that gap. It's like the junior sailors can't make you be transparent and bridge that gap, and they're always going to be like they're always going to be consuming that as like this skeptical, if not adversarial role until you give them a reason not to. But anyway,
whoever that I ever saw, me personally, reach out and enfranchise people without fail, and to a point where every sailor that walked away from him must have thought, I'm his best friend.
Yeah.
was Admiral Bill Moran. I still follow him in civilian life just because he's still that guy. He was always that guy, and he'll always be that guy.
Yeah.
And I think the example that he set with the way he led and the way he humanized himself and could have a conversation with anybody. I've got
that's
years
Doug
of
Perry,
story.
Man. Did you ever meet Doug Perry? He was a submarine admiral. That man, dude, he was that guy for me. Like that guy was the best officer I've ever like interacted with in my life. He's
still around.
Yeah, I know. He loved people. He loved cooks, which for a submarine officer to love cooks, it like that, you're a unicorn. And so like he was such an advocate for us. He empowered me in ways that I don't think any other admiral would have. Like that guy, I love that dude to death. Like I've never interacted with a flag officer like him before or since.
I don't think he's done moving up yet.
I hope not. I hope he makes it to the tippy top. Him and Gabe Miller was my CMC when I was there, and he's a mentor and good friend of mine, and I absolutely love that dude. But anyway, let's talk more about because we already kind of started with the whole GDub thing, right? Like how, like I know like the circumstances were obviously they had the slew of suicides in the 1 week period. It became that itself became a big story.
It was three in just over a month.
Yeah. Okay, I thought it was in a week. I know there was a stretch on the Lincoln where there was a bunch too, but so that was kind of the genesis of you taking the trip out there. Is that accurate?
That's exactly what it was. I talked to CNO. He said I can't break away from Phil's schedule, but go and please be real. And I did. And I went to the Stennis first and had a great talk on Stennis. And then went over to GW and had a good talk with the leadership. And then we did the all hands call. And, they asked, like, hey, we'd like an internet cafe. I was like, man, that is a great idea. But there's no one to fund it. And, we don't own land outside Newport News Shipyard. We don't own the land. It's a privately owned shipyard. We don't own the yard.
Yeah.
So I can't give you that. I can continue to convey what you do, what's going on, what sailors need. But to be honest with you, it's just not, it's not something, if I can't get a firefighting trainer at boot camp where it's going to make the difference between winning and losing the next war, I'm definitely not getting an internet cafe for you. But, and I own decisions. I don't say, Well, I'd love to, but it's up to the CNO. It's not
Right.
even up to him. It's at the OSD level, they make decisions and they fund about 15% of which each service wants because that's
Hmm.
all the money that's available.
Yeah.
So, do we need those things? Yes. So when that happened, it was hard for me because I've always, my entire life, been
Yeah.
somebody who's like, you are held to account for the things you say and do.
Right.
It never occurred to me that I could be held to account for something I didn't say or do. And
Yeah.
I couldn't make sense of it in my head. It hurt me. The things that people reached out and said in that same Facebook Messenger account about, I
Mm.
mean, there were death threats and I
Jesus.
mean graphic shit you would not even believe that I passed on to NCIS.
Yeah. That's
That
insane.
I just went, this is disturbing.
That same
Um,
shit happened to my friend. I don't know if it was during your time as MCPON, but Christina D'Arienzo, the TikTok chief, like I
yeah,
talked to her on a podcast about that experience, and that was something that she shared with me. Was she just got the most horrific message, like DMs and like on Instagram and Facebook and everything, death threats. Why don't you just kill yourself? Just all this crazy shit, and a lot of it was from
yeah,
chiefs. I like because I went into that like talking to her. I was just like trying to give her the benefit of the doubt and just being like, how could she arrive at the decision to post this video in a way that makes sense? And I couldn't get there in my head, but I didn't want to pass judgment because I'm like, I don't know what happened. So I need to talk to her. So I just reached out and was like, hey, if you're willing to, I'd really like to understand this. And then we became really good friends because she's fucking amazing. She's a better
yeah.
chief
Oh, I know her. I actually know
than
her.
most chiefs. Yeah, most chiefs I've ever met in my life. Like she's fucking incredible. And I would have never guessed that the story was what it was. And once she told it to me, it made complete sense. But like hearing that, I was just like fucking
Yeah, she's a
appalled,
cop
man.
in real life. That's the funny thing. She
Yeah,
knows about
yeah,
conduct. And, yeah, it just, yeah, that's a sad story too.
just
But
like a great person.
I just, it floored me. And when I called Admiral Moran and said, I can't believe this is happening, and
Yeah,
he's retired at this point, and he was much maligned by people who didn't understand what the hell was going on either.
yeah,
He just said, and he was so right because that's what he does. He said, you stepped on a a mine that's just been waiting to
mm-hmm,
explode. Sailors are bent about COVID and their
mm-hmm,
frustrations,
mm-hmm.
about not getting paid on time,
Yep,
about not doing DD 214s, and you just happen to you
yeah.
happen to be in the proximity,
I think it was
and
a perfect
mm,
storm of circumstances too, because the fact that it was an all hands call with cameras and people are recording it and stuff like that, I feel like it.
it was a month. Actually, it was the recordings that helped because a lot of people posted
Yeah,
stuff and said, "Hey, you didn't say this. I was
yeah,
standing there and I took this video."
mm-hmm,
Those a lot of those things helped me.
yeah,
But it took a month for that to die down, and then
mm-hmm.
about a month after that, I did my testimony, and Wasserman Schultz told me right before the hearing started, saying, "I'm going to ask you about it." Okay, you're not going to
Okay,
like
go
my
ahead.
answer,
Yeah, I was
but
gonna.
she was actually incredibly kind in the moment.
Okay,
It was that retired FC mass chief that was a real
yeah,
torpedo,
fucking
and
douchebag.
he came off looking horrible, like a petulant
Yeah,
child. He even slammed his book shut and walked out of the hearing because it didn't go his way. But
what the fuck?
the next guy up, when Wasserman Schultz said, "Your time is up," and he goes, "I don't suppose you're going to give me any more." She said no, and handed me off to the next person. And he was like, "Mass Chief, would you like to finish that thought you were trying so hard to get out?" I was like, "Yes, sir, I would. Thank you." And he was basically trying to intimate that I didn't seem to care about suicides or mental health. And I was like, I've been
That's
there. I've been at a place where I didn't think my life was going to continue nor needed to.
yeah,
And it even happened with me as a mass chief at one point. So uh, for you to not understand that somebody, even in this job, when I was getting a divorce, saw
yeah.
somebody and was not shy about talking to the force about it. I don't think anybody's advocated more directly and more graphically than I have about my own experiences.
Yeah.
And
Any
it's
any veteran that can say shit like that out loud about another veteran or military member, like that I don't care about service members' deaths, anybody that can like actually bring themselves to warp anything I've ever said or any thought process I've ever had into that kind of an accusation, I just have zero fucking respect for. Like that because you've been here, you've done it, you've experienced a lot of the things, the same like things experientially that I have, you fucking know better, and you're only doing that as some kind of like he's like a political stunt to further his own career or agenda or whatever. And it's just like, that's just evil. Like,
I will say this, I told you I really don't want to talk about today, but I will say one thing Jim has done masterfully that I did not focus a lot of time on. I spent as much time as I needed to on the Hill to do what I thought I could reasonably do to move the needle and get them to understand what we really needed. Jim has done a very great job of cultivating relationships on the Hill. So that same guy who was an adversarial asshole to me, he's developed a relationship with, as well as some of the great people like Rob Whitman from Virginia's First and some others that are just amazing people who want to do good things for good people. And he's really, he took a page from Mike Stevens in that regard.
Okay.
And that he's spent a lot of time working the Hill. It makes a difference, but it's not that same, when you asked me earlier about, before we started about what does a MCPON do, there's two halves of the job. There's advocating to sailors, hearing them out, making sure you don't have to visit every carrier, but you have to go on a carrier so that they see and understand that you know what they're going through.
Right.
So the deck plate advocacy that you can only do through seeing them in person. And then there's the other half, which is the getting the people, because the MCPON has 8 people that works for them and no authorities, no budget other than, travel, because they can't do anything. So what they have is the opportunity to influence people. And so the other half of that job is influencing the Hill, influence the Secretary of the Navy, the CNO, whoever stands between them and what they need to get for sailors. So Jim is doing a great job in that area where I spent less time. The 2 areas where I spent less time, one is the Hill, and 2 is my other service partners. Troy Black was my ride or die in the Marine Corps, but and Ron Green before him. But after that, I didn't have a lot of similar issues as the Air Force had. So did I spend a lot of time with Joe Bass? I really didn't.
God, I love her.
So
I don't only know her through social media, but she seems really impressive.
Let's have dinner, but if I've got just so many hours in the day to do work,
right?
I didn't hang out with Tony Grinston. We had touch points where we came together, but I didn't spend additional time where I thought, because I only had so much. Yeah, I needed to be present for sailors, and so we all make decisions for different reasons.
I would have been bad at that job for the same reasons. I think I would have. I wouldn't have been. I would have been so combative on C-SPAN. Holy shit! They probably would have thrown me out. I just can't. I can't stomach that shit. Especially from a guy that knows better, I would have ate his face. But
the ubiquity that I saw in Rick West and just his universal appeal, even today, made him the guy that I wanted to kind of follow in that, I'm going to take a page from his book and how he did it.
Right.
In spending a lot of his time with sailors.
Yeah. Did you ever do, this was something I was curious about, in particular with the GDub thing? Cause I remember I talked to my CMC Matt I think the next day or the day after when I saw him. I was like, hey Matt, how did you feel about that? And we talked a little bit, and I asked him, I was like, why, and I'm asking you, why, especially in a circumstance like that, do you, and maybe you do this sometimes and I'm just not aware, but do you ever consider, based on circumstances or based on the goal of the trip, ever just showing up cold, not being in the plan of the day, not having where you're not interrupting the normal routine of the ship and you're just walking on board and just saying, hey, what's up? And talking to sailors without an entourage, just you and Toby walked across the brow and just are talking to sailors.
Fun fact, I didn't take entourages. The most people I ever had with me, 2 at the most. I had, it was me and an MC, or it was me and Toby, or me and Smitty and an MC at most. I didn't believe in, again, I looked at the Rick West model. He traveled light, he traveled fast, he got to a lot of places, and that's how much budget I have to spend All those were factors, but I traveled as light as possible and with as little fuss as possible.
Okay.
It's funny. I came out to San Diego. I had, 3 days worth of stuff I was going to do. One of my former midshipmen, I call them mid kids, was a junior officer on the Zoom wall as an assistant navigator. And she says, "Hey, you're in San Diego. I just saw on Facebook. Can you come visit me?"
Okay.
And I said, "Yeah, you're on Zoom wall." She said, "Yep." So I said, "I'm gonna head over there." So I came over. I walked down the pier, walked on board. The CO nearly swallowed their tongue. I got to meet the CMC. We chatted for a while. Had a great time just talking to whoever was around. I get home that night. James Osborne calls me. He's at Serpent. And he calls me and says, "Hey, bro, what you doing?"
What the fuck?
I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm out here. I was hoping to see you in here." And he goes, "Hey, is there any way you could stop by and chat with Admiral Brown real quick in the morning?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to see him." He was at BC when I was at N1. We're N1 for life. So I said, "Yeah," and I love Admiral Brown. I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come by." So I come by and James meets me at the door, and the Admiral's standing there in the P-way, and we walk into his office, and he's like, smiles, his arm around my shoulder, door shuts, and he's like, "Don't ever do that again."
Yeah, you
ever
do that again, I'm going to fucking kill you.
I said, "I wasn't there as a MCPON doing a visit. I was there as a Master Chief mentor for one of my midshipmen who I care about deeply, and I just wanted to see how she was doing, let her brag about what she's doing."
Yeah.
He goes, "I get it. But you had the CO, the Desron commander, all these people freaking out."
But what if you give them a heads up and you're just like, "Hey, so I call Surfland and I'm like, "Hey, I want to do this." And then it trickles down, but I don't want to interrupt plan of the day. I don't want an entourage. I don't want any of the pomp and circumstance. I just want to walk around and talk to people.
So, most of my visits they were very lean. I don't know that I would say a lot of. You always got to sit down with the CO or whoever the senior officer is on board at the moment. And then you see the chief's mess. You go talk to sailors. Maybe do an all hands call if they've asked for that, or if I'm given the ability to do that. But beyond that, it's hard to explain. I think there are some people who just never. They were always concerned that I was going to come on board, I was going to accidentally see something, and then I was going to tell the boss, and it would filter down to them as a big bomb. And the best COs I met, they didn't do any prep work. I walk on board. I still probably a couple times, at least 2-3 times a month, somebody will ask me to come visit their ship, their unit.
Right.
Some people still get freaked out. I'm like, "Hey, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm just somebody who can talk about the old days."
Right.
But some freak out, and some are still really good about it and just say, "Sure, give us some insights," because they don't understand. Why doesn't the CNO understand that we need? It's like, of course he does, but he's balancing a million different things. And when Frank Cody came into the job, it's like, does she not understand? Of course she does. She's been in and out of that building a million times. But there are only so many things under a CNO's control. No one's a god. Not even the president. Everybody's got to answer to somebody, and it's a tough thing to explain if you've never been in that world. But again, it's why I travel. It's why I still talk about it, because people don't understand. And like you said, the first conclusion they come to is not a good one. It's the worst one.
Yeah.
So
I guess I used to always analyze them from the outside looking in as it becomes like an onerous, invasive process for the crew, because when they know a VIP is coming, you got to stop everything you're doing. You got to field day the ship. You got to wax the decks. You got to, as a cook, we were always like making the wardroom up and like making all kinds of treats and you're rolling out the red carpet. And so it becomes disruptive for the crew. And then for it to happen like in the way that it did on G-Dub, I was like, maybe that threw more gas on that fire where maybe it may have not existed, as like when the kid asked the question and then you said what you said and then they misinterpreted it. And like, I mean, they really just completely changed it because they got pissed off because, like you said, you touched a third rail that you didn't even know was there. And so it was just a perfect storm of circumstances. But had there not been an all hands call, for instance, and you were just walking around talking, like going shop to shop, just talking to people, and then maybe just sitting in the Chiefs mess talking to the Chiefs, sit in the CO stateroom, talk to the CO, and then bounce. Like, I was wondering, like, did that ever happen in that way, or has it ever been discussed? Like, that model ever been discussed, or it's just more informal, maybe not unannounced completely, but just like more informal, so it doesn't feel, because I think what happens is like, and this would be, you know, more of, like you said, like a question for Jim and his guys or whoever's next, but what I think happens is the perception is that you're there performing almost, like, because there's people taking pictures, and then it ends up on like D-Bids and fucking the Navy Times or social media or whatever. And so, like, I don't know if you recall this, but there was a CO that like put a gun on and took a watch. He was like standing like some kind of armed sentry watch on a ship, and everybody on social media. Go ahead.
So it was a CO of a destroyer, and he was on the bridge wing, and they handed him an M4, and the scope was backwards.
Yeah. Well, and everybody was just like, he's just doing it for pictures. You know, he probably stood 5 minutes of that watch.
Yeah, I think what was even funnier was there was a whole conversation that was never had. When they fired him, it was like, did anybody ask him if when they took the picture they thought, hey boss, this would be really funny if and then that just got lost in translation. He was fired before anybody had a chance to even ask him a question, because
they fired him over that.
They did, and a lot of sailors said that was a really good CO.
I bet he was.
So
wow, I didn't know that.
Always got to ask, what's the rest of the story that you don't hear, don't know, and don't care to ask about? But,
right, and I'm not making a case one way or the other, like he was wrong for doing it or right for doing it or anything. I'm just saying, like, the perception of it that I saw on the internet was that he was just like, the only reason he would do something like that is because he knew a picture was being taken, which no one even knows if that's true. You know, like, no one knows if it was a photo op. No one, like, or I mean, the people that were there probably do, but like there's that perception that people kind of just assume that you're doing it because they're like, what you're doing is a performative in nature and packaged for the consumption of the sailors on the ship that you're on for that all hands call, because there's cameras and because those things are then subsequently going to be shared on social media and websites and whatever. And so I just always wondered, like, well, okay, don't. You know, like, just don't do it that way all the time. Like, yeah, there are times, like, if you do an all hands call, I would say it's more beneficial to have cameras and have it be recorded, because then you can share it online and people get to hear the things that you said and get the same information that everybody else got at that all hands call. But then on the flip side, there are certain circumstances where I feel like it might be more appropriate to just, like, you know, kind of informally just be talking.
Gilday did not like doing all hands calls, and so
I would have hated it.
Richardson was like, let's see as many people as we can. Okay. Easiest way is to do an all hands call, then follow up by walking around.
Yeah.
Gilday was like, to me, that's too impersonal. I'd rather just walk around and talk to individuals. Yeah. So a lot of my visits with him were just that. Okay. Yeah. Somebody was always there with a camera, and, you know, it is what it is. But at least it was a different format.
Did you find it? Did you find it beneficial in any way as opposed to all hands calls?
Trust me, if I could have not had press, I would have been very happy with that. You know, I did not. I've endured press coverage. Yeah. But I never enjoyed it. Right. I think it gets in the way of, because it also can take, even if there is something you say in the middle of a conversation and people are like, why is he talking about that?
Yeah.
But you weren't there. Maybe you didn't hear the conversation coming in the door. Maybe there's a good reason for what happened. But again, human beings are so very today non-introspective. They see something, they form an opinion, and then it doesn't matter what comes next. That is their opinion.
Too late. So, Yep. All right. All right, let's see. I want to make sure I check off all the things on my list for as long as I have you. So, like, and we've kind of talked about it, but I want to explicitly ask the question of, like, what are the things, like the things that you can get done, the things that you have on your, like, life's to-do list for however long your term as MCPON is. What are the biggest obstacles to you getting those things done?
Money, without a doubt.
Yeah.
The Department of Defense does not get resourced the way it needs to be for what the American public expects for us to be able to do for them. Safeguarding a nation when you are the preeminent power, and I use that phrase very carefully, When you are the nation that stands tallest with the greatest resources in the breach, keeping nations free, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think the American public has kind of said, we don't want to be that nation. We have problems here at home. Let's not. And I'm not taking a political position on purpose, because another thing I believe in wholeheartedly is the military should be apolitical, period.
Yeah.
But I think what we saw in the last election said we want something smaller. That's fine. But when we don't have a 1.0 carrier presence here or there, or we can't provide, submarine coverage during this time because we are out, that's a risk that I think never gets explained to the public.
Yeah.
The threat that China poses in space and on the surface, I think, is not clearly understood, or most Americans would be freaking out.
Yeah.
I was an intel professional for 15 years and stayed connected to Tier 1 SOF and National Mission Force stuff. And I did not know what they do at a particular NIOC that deals with that area specifically. And then I went for a visit, and I was like, okay, I'm going to cut out the leotard jokes and the Space Force and all that. But you have to tell people what's going on. You have to find a way to pull this information out of the compartments and explain to the American public what's really going on, because when it happens, it's going to be too late. And knowing all this stuff that they have evidence, they see, they know, you have to. I don't blame the American public for their apathy, because they don't know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And or what the risk is, and how very likely we will lose if we don't pick up our game and get serious.
Yeah. I've heard enough of some things like that tangentially, and I've heard a lot of like former like SF operators that do like podcasts or get interviewed or whatever talk about people don't understand what it's really like out there in the real world, like what the threat assessment actually is, what the intelligence actually looks like. And if you did, you'd be freaking the fuck out. And so like I've been in just enough intelligence briefings filling in for like my department head occasionally, where I'm like, yeah, I don't want nothing to do with this. I don't want to be that aware. Like I don't like I do in a way, just to be prepared if that's possible. But then at the same time, I'm like, I mean, I sat in one right before the Ukraine war popped off where they were telling me all these things about what was about to happen. And I'm like, how do we, like, I was shocked that we even knew what we did. And then I was real uneasy for like 3 weeks before it actually happened, because I knew what was going to happen. And I was just like, this is kind of terrifying. Just the perspective that like, we know the things that we know. And like, and I've watched IS's brief things on slides, and I'm just like, holy shit, like I didn't know we even knew shit like this. And so it was just, it's like enough to, it'll make you not sleep good. That's for sure.
There's a reason I'm looking at property in South Dakota.
I've been trying to get my wife to move to Montana, but she doesn't like snow. I'm like, come on, Wyoming, somewhere like that. Like the Dakotas.
My besties from home live in Montana, in Hamilton, and the Banana Belt, not Eastern Montana. Yeah. My sister lives in Minot, which I don't know if you've ever been to Minot, North Dakota, but it's the coldest place on earth. I was in Russia.
My best friend is from, I forget the name of the town, but it's in, I think it's North Dakota. I'm almost positive. It might be South Dakota, but it's one of them. And like, yeah, he's told me enough about it where I'm just like, God damn. But like, also it's sparsely populated in the middle of the country. Nobody's going to be messing with me. Like if the whole world ended, I probably wouldn't know, because I'd be on 20 acres in the middle of nowhere, growing my own food and raising my own animals.
When I was living in Russia, I called my sister, and she said, what's it like in Russia? I said, it's cold. Yeah. It's 20, drops down to 0 or 5 below. And then after a week, it warms back up to 15 or 20. And she goes, 20? That's warms like back up. It's 55 below here in Minot. I was like, yeah, that's Pluto, the surface of Pluto cold.
I grew up about an hour from Detroit, and so like Michigan is they measure snow in feet up there. But like the coldest I've ever been in my life, though, is I was standing command duty officer on submarine base New London, and you had to go down to the pier when subs were coming in and out, and just to like be there for whatever reason. And you'd like notify the base CO that the ship actually went out or came back or whatever. And the wind coming off the water of the Thames just like chills you to your bone in the middle of winter. And I was just, that's the coldest I've ever been in my fucking life. It was insane. I've been to Alaska, I've been to all kinds of places, but like that was the coldest I've ever been in my life. Was
for me, Army Navy 2005, I think. Veterans Stadium, Philadelphia, coldest I've ever been.
Oh wow, yeah, Philly gets cold. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. All right, so the one of the ones I've spent a lot of time on, we're going to calm down, listeners. We're getting to the Chiefs mess stuff. I know you're on the edge of your seat. Like I talk about it a lot, so people are probably, when you going to ask him about the Chiefs mess? The recruiting retention crisis is what I've been calling it, just because as we've all watched, like the people will say the standards have been lowered, pun intended. With like they're changing the PRT rules and the high school diploma things, and everybody freaked out about all those things when they happened, to try to encourage recruitment. And then they've the bonuses being what they are, it seems like everybody's getting an enlistment bonus now, everybody's getting re-enlistment bonuses. I have my ideas, but I'm curious, did you see this coming? One, because I predicted it, and I don't know if the reasons I predicted it were correct, but I suspect they are. But did you see it coming, and kind of what do you think the path forward should be, I guess, to try to rectify it?
So I'll start by saying, and this is the only thing I'll speak about in today terms, just because we got a briefing recently. There is no recruiting crisis. The Navy has recruited 105% of goal this year. So
this year,
I'll tell you that they've recovered. I spoke last summer at an American Legion conference. About 7,000 folks came together in New Orleans to talk about this. And I believe that this is going to be a perennial challenge for us until we fundamentally start changing some things in America that culturally will grow us the kind of people that we need and the culture that we need, where people consider service as a viable option. It's not easy in post-COVID to get people to go to any job where you have to go there as a human being and go in person.
Yeah.
That's tough. So the military can't really phone that in. You got to go do it to do the work. So that's already hard. 27% of the American public are even eligible when you take medical issues, criminal activity, and all the other things off the table. That's a small percentage. That small percentage of that, many of them want to go to college. They want to be engineers. They want to do other things.
Right.
And maybe they'll end up with us, but they aren't enlisting because we're all competing for those same awesome people.
Yeah.
When you get down to it, we've got to recruit about 1 in every 5 that we talk to, and that is a tall task on a great day. On a tough day, competing against a good economy, that's an even bigger challenge.
Yeah.
We absolutely saw this coming. There are some fundamental things that you mentioned about what we do now to open the pool. There is goodness in saying, does a tattoo of a half moon right here in the back of your neck mean you shouldn't be able to serve?
Right.
I would say probably not. In that case, no. But when now I can have tattoos just about here, there, and everywhere, there's a fundamental reason. I used to say no, like, of course you don't, because you don't like change. Like, no. In the meetings we'd have, I'd say, everybody forgets when we moved away from that Navy. In the early 80s, the American public had zero faith and trust in the military. Vietnam, a lot of other contributing factors, but we introduced the PRT in 1983 and said we can't just have people be wantonly fat. I think it was 85, 86 under Bushy, I think, when we came up with the urinalysis. And, back when I came in, it was 3 strikes and you're out. You could do pot twice. You couldn't do coke, but if you did pot, third one, you were out. But we instituted a drug policy and said we need to clean up. We started saying you got to shave your face, no more mutton chops. We needed to look like who the American people aspired to be, not what the average citizen was, because we wanted them to admire, respect, and place their trust and faith in us. we are undoing some of that with some of the changes that I was around for and we made.
Right.
But, you get your opportunity to render an opinion and then we go from there. And we all know that as chiefs. So I did my time in my space in saying, I got called and said, no, I don't think a half moon right here, but why not do a waiver and by exception allow that instead of saying next
instead of changing it. Yeah.
And with midshipmen, the conversations I would have when they would say, why don't you think I should get a tattoo? The Navy says I can now. And I said, do you want to be a board member for Boeing making, $500,000 a year because that's what a 3 or 4 star is going to make when they get out and go to work in industry? How many board members do you see with tattoos on their neck? The answer right now is none, and I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
Right.
Members of Congress, do you see that? Yes, you do. It's not commonplace. These things we do, they can limit our opportunities. And I used to try and say, do what you want, but remember, you're being judged at some point, and that's what you're going to be judged for, fair or not. So
here's something I've always wondered. Me and my wife have been talking a lot about the changes that the new administration has been making, in particular to the military. And one of the things that came up was like now they're changing it to where trans people can't serve in the military anymore. I'm not going to take I don't agree with that, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But the conversation led to, there are jobs in the military where, like, for instance, I have a lot of CTs that listen to this podcast, Ariana being one of them, who we talked about a little bit earlier, but they largely, like, not always, I know they deploy on submarines, and I know sometimes they go, like, Desiree is another CT that has done some podcast stuff with me, that she was with Naval Special Warfare, and so she was out there doing things. And so it's like, with the understanding that happens and that these people wouldn't be able to do that in jobs like that, or like administrative based rates or other things that like IS is probably it's applicable. There's a lot of jobs like the computer, like anything computer based, like satellite stuff, or anything that happens inside of like a comm center or whatever, or like a watch floor. It's like we could recruit people that have sat in front of a computer their whole life because they don't have legs, or they're in a wheelchair because of whatever reason, and still like cognitive ability is still there, probably like way more competent at computer based things because they're very limited in some of the things they can interact with. So maybe they fell in love with computer programming, or maybe they fell in love with whatever. And so there's like a large group of people that I feel like would be recruitable on waivers for very specific purposes. Have you ever heard any discussion of that happening? Because I always wondered, like, especially before, because I did read this year that they had met the recruiting goal, but in the last, I think, 2 or 3 years, I read an article about why they fired Franchetti, and that was like one of the accusations was she hadn't met the recruiting goal until this year. And I'm like, she only had 2 years, but whatever. But like, give her a fucking minute. And also she did after 2 years, but whatever.
Those levers are in place, by the way. You come to the job. The recruiting numbers at the end of the year you take the job are not reflective of something you've done. It's in the
takes
HR
time.
world, it takes a lot of time. But yes, there's a way to bring people in to do those jobs, but not as uniform military, because wearing uniform means that's what we have GS opportunities for.
That's fair.
It's and for enduring requirements, that's what GS jobs are for. Contractor requirements are for flex or for truly unique or niche capability you're not going to need forever, just for right now. Because the idea of being in uniform means that if I call you, I can put a gun in your hand and you can go out the door. I get what you're saying as far as we have opportunities ashore, but for those folks too who are doing longer sea tours and need a place to rotate back to while they recoup a little bit, having some of that seashore flow mattered a lot.
Yeah.
Ask an AB.
I guess I didn't think about that. Yeah, that makes sense. You got to have somewhere to rotate to have the downtime before you go back operational again. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. All right, Chief Smith stuff. So I'm very critical of the Chiefs mess in certain ways because I'm passionate about making it better, and because during my time, like the reason, like you explained that you were going to get out a few times during your career, the thing that kept me in is I was an 11-year chief. I'd been a chief for maybe a few years on my second submarine, and I was ready to get out. I mean, I was ready to get out at every reenlistment up to that point too, but I just didn't. And the thing that kept me in for the career was they put me in charge of the chief season during the last one that I would be on that submarine for. And it was like crack to me. I was just immediately like fully like I was obsessed. I spent all my time on the chief season. We were in the shipyard. So like the galley was shut down, and I was like, the command career counselor was my only real like primary duty that I had to do. So I had a ton of bandwidth to devote to it. And a lot of the other chiefs that were sponsors were extremely busy. So I just kind of almost became the pseudo sponsor for all 5 guys that were going through the season on that submarine. And it was the coolest thing. It was probably my favorite chief season I've ever experienced, because I got to do it that way, where I was effectively sponsoring 5 dudes and I was super involved in it. And it's kind of all I was doing. And I was immediately addicted to it. And so like, I've kind of pursued it in that way the entire time, because I didn't feel like my season experience was as good as it could be. Like it was good. Like I was on the Jimmy Carter at the time, and the Chiefs mess there is very unique because you have to volunteer to go to that submarine. Like you can't get sent there. You have to volunteer, screen, get accepted. And the Chiefs that you get on a platform like that are all raising their hand to be there. So they're all type A, just like pipe hitters that would be the number 1 EP on any other submarine in the fleet.
Joe Reck and Jason, they're both working for companies to work for up in Bremerton.
Okay.
Still taking care of that same community.
Yeah.
I had met them when I went on board Jimmy Carter back in 05, 06.
Okay. Yeah. So, I was like, I think beginning of 2011 to the end of 2013 is when I was there. But the Chiefs mess there was incredible, and I credit it a lot for the leader I became, especially the Cobb. His name was Eric Antoine. He was like, that guy should be teaching at the Senior Enlisted Academy forever. He should just be like the chief graybeard that never leaves. But him and all the guys that were there, like I credit them for me being a good chief at all, like because I got to grow up in a mess with all these super senior guys that, I mean, you couldn't even think about doing something wrong before they smacked you back in the line and talked to you about why you did it wrong and taught you how to do it right and mentored the shit out of you. But the season experience I thought could have been a lot better. And I think most of it was because of how busy and distracted those guys were, but that's neither here nor there. So I fell in love with doing it, and I wanted to make it better for them than it was for me. And then moving on, as I experienced other seasons in other places, I sort of realized the subjective and wildly varying nature of the delivery. And so I'm curious. One, the question I have to start is, how do you feel about the current status and direction of the Chiefs mess as like a group of leaders? And granted, like based on your context when you were in it, not judgment of current day. I know you don't want to go down that road because you're not in it right now. So it's, we don't have to explore that. But like while you were in it, kind of how did you evaluate like where we were and what were some of the things that you saw as problems that you wanted to work
on? Let me give you a data point. In 1998, when I made chief,
good Lord,
nobody had. Which, by the way, yeah,
I joined in 2002, so holy shit.
That's new school, believe me. There are old school dudes I've met.
Yeah.
But what's funny is nobody had Chiefs t-shirts. This is going to sound like a dumb thing to start with.
Paul has told me that same thing, like how it's changed. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was not a thing. The self-aggrandizement, the problem with people is when you say, I like apples. Some sailors are going to hear, oh, so you don't like peaches? You don't like bananas? What the fuck is wrong with you? It's like, that's not what I said.
Right.
But you can't then convince them that's not what you said. So as we've talked about before, subjective hearing, it's frustrating when I say swag is not helpful. When you say, we're the backbone, we're the spine, we're the guts, we're the guys that make shit go. And first classers are like, what are we? Are we consequential? Because
funny story. I tried to make an apparel brand. It's not really doing anything, but so like I have like a shop button on the website, and if you go there, it's a bunch of shirts that I design and stuff. And I made one with a spine on it that said sailors are the backbone for that, just to poke fun at that exact concept of like, we're not the backbone of fucking anything. Like the sailors doing the work are the backbone of everything. Like it's such a stupid thing to glob onto. And it was from some speech that an admiral made about the Chiefs mess during one of our birthdays. Yeah. And I'm just like,
just carry those ships down into the sea on their backs.
Cool. I appreciate the praise and the deference that he had to the Chiefs mess in that speech. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, but not really. Like my only responsibility is leading these people. I'm taking care of them and giving them everything they need to do the thing. I'm not doing the thing anymore most of the time. Like when I was sitting in the dive chair on a submarine, I was doing the thing. But like outside of that, I'm like leading and managing people and things to make sure that they're prepared and they're qualified and they have all the backup that they need and the tools and resources and all the qualifications and blah, blah, blah. So.
When Mike Carbone was the brigade master chief and I was the CMC at the Naval Academy, and now he's the CMC at the Naval Academy, which is amazing. We used to interview anybody that was going to come there as a senior enlisted to work in the brigade. So if you drove your truck onto the yard and you had one of those stickers that covered the entire back window of your car, like results, not excuses, some ripped out goat that only Ray Kemp ever looked like, or Sean Isbell ever looked like, I'd laugh, be like, Mike could be like, hey, what do you think the role of a chief petty officer is here to take care of people with midshipmen? It's like, stop.
Yeah.
Midshipmen, this is a midshipman factory. We turn out officers in the Navy and Marine Corps. We are not the main thing here, and you're at one of the very few commands where the junior sailors are not the main thing. It's midshipmen.
Yeah, it's midshipmen.
I'm going to need you to put that on a back shelf. And people, to get back to what I was saying about the swag, it's good to be proud of what you do. Being a chief for 24 years was a deliberate choice I made. I chose after 1 year to not seek a commission. And frankly, I did that before I made chief, and I never looked back. I knew I wanted to be a chief, and I thought that was it. I was like, thank God.
Yeah, same.
Chief. This is awesome.
I'm still shocked I retired a master chief because I got a mouth on me, but here we are.
I feel like pride goeth before the fall. Pride is a sin in religious terms. It's recognized in many different circles as something that an excessive amount of ego gets in the way of goodness, because it works against humility. And people don't like to follow people who cannot see themselves as of the herd. You can still be in charge. You can still be, I don't know if you noticed, because you were we both retired, and we walked out of uniform in the same month, at least in September of 22. Yeah. But the first note I sent out, the first day I had the job, I said, 3,000 mass chiefs. You would be shocked at how many people wrote me and said, so why don't you mention CMCs? I said, in that letter, I said the brightest line we draw in an organization that preaches, teaches, and espouses unity and unity of effort is between mass chiefs and that are not the CMC and the CMC, and between mass chiefs and everybody else. It does not take away from my authority, responsibility, or accountability to hear somebody out. And so many young chiefs, they'll do this. Well, I don't agree. And so we can't, it's like, no, my job is to hear you out. And then I will accept the accountability for what I say we're going to do next, or I recommend to the CO. But my job is not to agree with you. That's why we have a rank structure and experience that it serves. But you have an obligation to hear them out. You have an obligation to sit down and patiently say, and sometimes do training on the other end and say, here's the thing. You've never been in another afloat mess. You have no idea why the CO on the Chung Hoon allowed sailors to wear civilian clothes underway in a risky situation. My boss, I'm not letting him do that. So, because that's bad for sailors. We have a fire and you burn to death because you're wearing cotton pajamas.
Yep.
I'm not. No, that's not happening. It's the same reason. Don't laugh because you've got a beard. When I said I stand against beards in any shipboard environment.
Yeah.
What about in the yards and dry dock? A fire can still break out.
Yeah.
If I can't get you out of a space safely,
mm-hmm.
I have to answer for why I thought it was okay for you to have a beard.
Right.
And I every conversation I ever had with Admiral Waters when he was 13, Admiral Now when he was C&P, Admiral Burke when he was C&P, CNO when Gilday was in the office was, I am willing to concede to everything in the Navy outside the gangway down onto a ship or any place where you have a fire hazard that's similar.
Yeah.
You can have a beard. But in that environment, it has to be sacrosanct. If you leave it up to COs to say, I don't feel there's risk today, they're going to make the wrong decision for the wrong reasons, and they're going to put sailors' lives at risk. So,
fun fact, every submarine underway on nuclear power that casts off lines and doesn't have an inspection team on board is wearing beards. Yeah. So it's like, what are we even doing? Like, I remember I got in a big fight with my CO over, when Conor McGregor fought Floyd Mayweather, the other crew sent the fight down on like a thing, and he allowed people to smoke on the mess decks. I threw such a fucking temper tantrum over that because of the sanitation implications and everything else. But by the way, you're not allowed to do that on a submarine. But if you're the CO, you're God when you're underway. So I guess
it's always funny when you wonder who looks at like social media. And one Veterans Day, I posted a photo of my grandfather, my favorite veteran. He was a hard hat diver, World War II. And as a diver, you could have either a full beard or no beard. And he had a full beard. And him and his three buddies are standing there, and they took a great picture. And I put that up, and not even 5 minutes later, Admiral Moran texts me and he goes, "Great. Now every sailor is like, see, your grandfather had a beard.
It's part of our heritage." Yeah.
Stop it. I get it.
Son of a bitch. I was just sharing a picture I liked. Yeah. That's hilarious. So going back to, you talked about the line drawn between Master Chiefs and CMCs. I've focused a lot of my time and analysis on the line drawn between the Chiefs mess and everyone else. Less so between chiefs and officers. Like there's a lot of people that view like the evolution of the Chiefs mess as kind of like an officer, like kind of moving more towards the wardroom than anything else. But do you think, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I do see a problem by the artificial divisions that I think we've created. By our uniforms look different, our quarters are different, we eat in a different place. We on submarines, we don't eat in a different place because submarines, it's too small, right? But we invite the chiefs 5 minutes early to chow, and they eat before everyone else, which it's gross. I don't know why we do it that way. I think they should be eating last. I think they should be in the same uniforms. I think that we should be sleeping in the same berthing. I think there's an argument obviously for the utility just of having a separate meeting space because leadership and the things that we need to say behind closed doors. But there's a lot of divisions created, both visual or kind of superficial, but then quite literally. And I think that contributes markedly to at least creating an environment where we are constantly battling a division and a lack of trust between chiefs and junior enlisted, if not contributing directly to that sabotaging of trust and everything else. So curious what you think.
First of all, chiefs need a space to do cross-departmental communication and collaboration. That to me is a sacrosanct fact. You have to have that space.
Right, I agree.
The last 2 years, when I've gotten asked to speak at Khaki Balls, I have said something that it never fails. Somebody will not hear me. But I've said, congratulations, this is great.
Mm-hmm.
The Navy, by the way, does not need the Chiefs mess. And you see chiefs recoil in horror. I said, to be the preeminent naval power and to win a war, you need a chief's mess that does what we do. It's what makes our Navy different from the others in the world. It's why we're better. But don't take it as a birthright. It's something that has to be earned through your actions and what you do with that chief's mess space and that opportunity. So to your point, there is a reason I think that we have that space and we have to have that separate opportunity because it facilitates the ability to leverage that cross-departmental communication to make the unit better than we would be individually. But it has to be earned, and that's the problem. I think if you are a part of a high-functioning chief's mess that serves a crew ably, and they know because they feel it that you put their needs first because they're the ones doing the heaviest lifting, they're not going to wonder why you have a separate space. They're going to be grateful for the magic.
Right.
When you get that aloof, we're better than you, we're separate, we're the whole reason that the Navy wins, not you. Priorities, look at me, not let me point out,
and that's
Captain.
That's what I'm pointing at is in addition to the swag and the pride stuff that you've already talked about, for me, it's the privileged parking. It's the front of the line privileges. It's the different uniforms and the different everything. It's like we create, like, there's utility to the separation that you just described, like the separate meeting space for cross-departmental communications. I 1,000% agree with. It's required. But then there's all this other stuff, and I feel like when you see junior sailors pushing back against the chief's mess or just voicing their reasons for not trusting, in addition to just negative experiences with individuals, they point at things like that, like the chief's park. Like, good.
No, I was going to say, I think that when you hear sailors complain about it, what I hear them saying is, I'm suffering through bad leadership, and I don't understand why privileges are afforded this group that's not serving me or helping me become the best, most competent, capable sailor I can be. They're saying, if you have all this stuff, why are you not using it to benefit the people who are going to do the work? I don't like that you have that privilege, so to speak. I used to eat on the mess decks, even as a CMC. I'd go out, sit down on the mess decks and see what's going on. All the best gossip is out there.
Same. Yeah. Like, and I mean, I didn't really have a choice because submarines, but like, I'd liked to not sit at the chief's table if I could get away with it, or I would eat before the meal because I was the cook chief. So that's kind of when we eat. And I like to check in on my guys and talk to the FSAs and whatever. But it, like, I guess, I agree with what you're saying. I think what I hear more so than that is like you're right, but also I think there's a certain amount of like the because I don't know how popular this is going to be, like, even though the listeners have heard it before, like, I think the Chiefs creed is most like largely hot garbage and needs to get revised, but like, not because the content, like some of the content I really hate, but like you don't walk away from reading that knowing who we are and what we do. Like, it's not an ethos. It does not communicate a mission statement of any kind. It sounds like the end of a really good pinning script that somebody was like, oh, use this. It sounds great. For me, it's like all those little things are a death of a thousand cuts for like where we're setting up chiefs to fail by saying you're kind of framing their entire existence as they're indoctrinated into the mess as you're superior or you're better than, and you like that's why you have all these privileges.
Yeah, I don't know if I can go down that road with you. I think there's goodness in the creed, but you got to read it. And I used to frequently say, more is expected of you, more is demanded of you. The part about exalted being used wisely or carefully. The idea that I think the words are in there that people need to hear, but I think that they don't always clearly read them and remind themselves after maybe that first day, go back and read it again and say, I need to be a humble servant leader, because this essentially it's telling me I exist because of what people have done before me, and what I'm now expected to carry on my shoulders, and not in a way that I hate self-aggrandizement. I hate attention. My Hogan would tell you, I hate recognition, but I crave appreciation. I don't need to be recognized. I don't need to stand in front of somebody and have people talk about how that makes me uncomfortable. But Richardson would get up and he'd start to speak. And I did this to him once on status, and he goes, "Get up here." And I was like, "No, They didn't come to see me; they came to see you.
Yeah.
But when the questions get shitty, I'll be right there.
Right. Yeah. I'll jump in front of the bullet for you, but I'm not coming up there right now.
Because
Yeah.
that's the part that I liked.
I'm the same way. Like I don't like the attention or the self-aggrandizement or any of those things. I just like, for me, the problems I have with the creed are more the subjectivity and things left up to interpretation, like the responsibilities and privileges that don't appear in print. Okay, well, why don't they? Everything else has an instruction and a policy document and everything else.
So
and then
why would you focus on that instead of saying, how come every time Chiefs scream Navy pride, they do it 3 times? Did you not hear me the first time? Or even the second?
I hate that too, to be fair. Like, I mean, I think I agree with everything that you don't like, but then I guess I go a little bit further with it in that I just feel like we could do so much better. It's not even that I think the creed itself in its current version is inherently bad. I just think it falls so short of communicating.
Trust me, Vio did a very soft rewrite of it to kind of clean up some of the language. It's not that people don't recognize, who've been around, in the mess 20 years, that it's not our most articulate document. But at this point in our development, with the history and tradition, which is never the reason you should do something, but Bushy, he used to tell this story when something happened during initiation, and the CNO called him in and said, "Hey, we're going to stop doing this. And by the way, we use this with Richardson when he wanted to do something similar." And Bushy, he did not, as Laura would have it, take off his anchors, toss them at the CNO, and walk out the door. He said, "What I actually did was say, hey, boss, you have every right to do what you got to do, but you're going to have to pick a different MCPON, because there isn't one chief who will listen to a thing I say after I do this."
Yeah.
And he was right, because it, to some degree, because the MCPON has no authorities, you rely on influential power, and that, and I hate to use the term, but likership, or at least ability to relate to me, is so important in that equation. And no one is gonna try and rewrite that thing substantially, because they think that instead of saying this is an improvement, let's go as an enlightened 20 years matured force, or 127-year matured force. Every chief who ever read the creed and it was a different version be like, so our creed didn't matter, we didn't matter, the uniforms we wore weren't good enough. There's 500,000 retired chiefs out there in the wild, and they would make it all about them instead of about the chiefs.
Sure, and I mean, I that's always going to happen, and I don't care, but like, I don't think that should stand in the way of progress either.
I just don't know if anyone's ever going to get there.
I mean, I'll send it to you. I did it. Somebody challenged me to do it one time because I talked so much about it, and so I did it as like a fun thought experiment. But like, it wasn't even really me doing it. Like, so this guy Dan, he was a Naval Special Warfare tech. He was at ET. He just retired not too long ago, but he's done a bunch of podcast stuff with me, and we did a Teaching of the Creed series because during COVID, like, everything being remote, I was like, well, I'll do a bunch of Teaching of the Creed podcasts in the event that somebody's isolated during the season and has to do it remotely. Maybe these will help them digest the content or whatever. And so I did each module with a guest, right? And Dan, he was a first class. He retired as a first class. Should have been a chief, but that's just not the way the cards fell. But we did credibility of a chief, and I was like, who better to question the credibility of a chief than a first class? So I was like, come on, like, you and I are going to do this. And during that, do you recall there's a short talk with Chief Petty Officers article from like the 1917 Blue Jackets manual that's linked in one of those modules. So I believe it's at the end, it's like a summary of points of what the article is talking about. And when we were going through that, he goes, why isn't this the Chief's Creed? Like those bullet points. Because I love that article. I think it's fucking incredible, and largely outside of the dated like vernacular and terms, it's really, really great in its content. And so it's based on that. It's largely like a slight modification of those bullet points, but I'll send it to you just because I'm curious if you think it's progress or not. But
I think that especially the current MCPON Jim in the letters that he sends out, So you have the legacy document of the creed.
Yeah.
And I think most would agree it's not all encompassing.
Yeah.
And I think what Jim attempts to do is bridge that gap between what we have and what the Chiefs mess needs to hear in the beginning of that year, in the beginning as they start, and fill in those gaps with the letters that he sends out. That's the purpose of them. So
yeah, I guess part of me with the subjectivity of it, because like I've read all Jim's memos too, and I didn't think they were very productive. One, because they were so short, and so it was just like I didn't feel like there was enough there. But then also that from all the people that I've talked to, they're not taken as seriously as I think he intended for them to be, where they're not having most places anyway, they're not having a lot of the robust conversations about the memos that he intended.
Let's say he makes it longer, and then everybody's like, great, another 20
another
there's no pleasing everybody. That's the problem. When you're the man in the arena, you really just don't you can't appreciate the challenge for what it is. The best way to approach any of this is just take what you can of value away from the experience. Be a good and decent person, and somehow, one way or another, you'll be better for the experience.
Yeah.
I still believe with the model we have that a self-sourced leadership training regimen is the only way we have forward to add some professionalism to and cultural change of perspective, which is really what it is.
Yeah.
Initiation is not going to make you smarter. It's going to change your perspective. I used to say from me to we, so that you understand there's no self-serving anymore. Everything you do is for the team and the teammates that will carry that heavy load.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about that some more, because that was something I definitely want your perspective on. Is Chiefs initiation, Chief season, generally. You've seen it evolve a hell of a lot more than I have, and I'm sure you've obviously seen a lot more of a sample size than I have as well. Do you think the Chiefs season in the versions that you've experienced it and been in a position to observe it, do you think it is the most productive version of a leadership development experience that, like you just described, that we have, or are there things that you think we could be doing a lot better?
So part of the discussion that we had with the CNO when he wanted to end it was, and by the way, a lot of former MCPONs and aged professionals gave us a lot of great advice on how to shape that argument. And, Paul, incredibly adept at necking down and getting rid of a lot of the emotion because, a nuke engineer like Richardson, he was able to think just like him.
Yeah, he knew exactly how his brain worked, 100%.
And I said, from an HR perspective, unless you've got $2.2 billion in your pocket to create a brick and mortar system,
right?
And we send people away. And I said, and even if you do that, you spend that money, time and opportunity cost, loss to the fleet, instructors, curriculum, all the things that come with what we call an ANOC course, Advanced Non-Commissioned Officers course.
Yeah.
All that pain, it will still not be what you will not have a.
It won't be perfect,
because the personal ownership that a Chiefs mess gets because they do it. It does suck that it is so disaggregated that you can have a widely varied experience.
Yeah.
But there are still, everybody speaks roughly the same language and even the same dialect, so that if you go from one mess to another, you can understand. The problem is not, I don't think, with initiation, as we began the journey truly with Rick West and professionalizing the experience and making it a year-round process with, at the time, Sailors 365 and CPO 365, and as that's grown into what it is, it's been a long journey, and it's getting better every year. It gets more professional. There's zero tolerance anymore for, as Ray Kemp used to eloquently say, you don't use humiliation to teach humility. And I think that we have learned that lesson, even if we occasionally make mistakes across 38,000 people worldwide. But the problem is the ego that comes from this pumping up experience that's not tempered by, okay, now quietly go back out and do the job of a chief. Chief should be the soft forces of the Navy, and that we're the quiet professionals who let our deeds speak, not our words. And it's frustrating. We should celebrate who we are amongst ourselves, and really almost exclusively amongst ourselves.
I agree.
And Navy Chief, Navy Pride, I heard you the first time, and I'm very proud to say it that first time. After that, you got me.
Yeah,
so,
I was screaming bloody murder doing it for the first few years, and then I started I'm like, what am I doing? What are we doing? Like, what am I doing?
Look at your junior officers and look at your junior sailors when you're screaming that.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, whether you think it's fair or not, that judgment plays a role in how we're perceived and how effectively we can lead.
100%. I've spent a ton of time on that on the podcast, as far as like the perception setting, like the new chiefs coming into the mess are starting from a deficit and have to overcome those perceptions and any lack of trust that they have as a result. But
so for your chief petty officers who are listening, I have pride in being a chief, and I'm still a chief petty officer.
Yeah.
So I'm saying you can have so much pride it can get in the way of anybody wanting to follow you. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Do you think there would be any value? I've made a case for it, and I never understood to why we didn't do it, because I do believe there's a lot of value in the initiation season, even though I hate that we call it initiation. I just think that there are better ways that we could be spending the time, and that we could get more of a consistent experience if I guess the learning objectives and some of how it was executed was formalized via like an instruction and a master course document and everything else. And much like with like, we got IGs and everything with teaching of the creed. So like kind of a similar process, leaving room for the like platform and warfare community specific things with like the demands of delivering the season and the heritage piece and everything else. It's like, why isn't there a formal course document saying that like, these are the learning objectives, these are the things you need to teach, these are what the events should be trying to accomplish, just to provide a framework and some guardrails for the people executing the season to prevent, one, like the stuff that pauses the season and has CNOs wanting to end it, but two, and more, probably more relevant, is what you just described with like the humiliation should not be used to teach humility, because in my experience, it's not as rare as you might think. And especially the experiences that I've been like receiving on this end of doing the podcast thing from the new chiefs going through the season, I think a lot of them are extremely intelligent and extremely well read in ways that prior generations might not have been, and they're really vexed by the experience and don't understand why these people are treating them the way that they should. And Desiree was one of my favorite people to talk to about it, because she said the thing that confused her the most about, because she separated after making chief because she just couldn't do it, and there was a lot of background with like mental health and some traumatic experiences that kind of led her out the door. But one of the big things that she said when she went through the chief season that confused her was, why aren't they spending time trying to earn our trust instead of the other way around? Like, why do I have to earn my way into an organization I was already selected to be a part of? And so that was,
I used to have a lot of fun with chief selecting, especially my last year. And I was sitting out here in San Diego, and I said, I heard one of the chiefs ask you about how many signatures you had in your book.
Yeah.
And one of the selectees stands up and goes, I it's hard balancing work. I was like, yeah, I get you. How many of you have gone to see a chief and they weren't there, and maybe you went back 2-3 times, you couldn't find him? And I raised a bunch of chiefs, selectees raised their hand, and I said, we teach, and you've heard us say, previous MCPONs have said, use the phrase humble servant leader.
Yeah.
If you had the respect to come by and try and find me and you didn't catch me, I'm gonna come find you.
Yeah.
And so maybe the question when one of those chiefs asks you, why don't you have any signatures? Why don't you come see me? It's like, I don't know, chief, if you're a humble servant leader, why didn't
you come see me?
And,
yeah.
One of the chiefs after the selectees left was like, that's kind of fucking bullshit. And I was like, no,
No, it's
there is a
not.
point to this. You have an obligation to develop these people.
Yeah.
By the way, it can be selfish. It shouldn't be. But if you want to build an army of the willing that believes in you and will help be a part of your efforts, you need to engender their trust and support by going to them and sitting down with them and saying, hey, stop what you're doing, make some time for me. You can't this idea that you'll come kiss my ring. That's not what chiefing is about. And no good chief would tell you that. But somehow during that 6 weeks, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's the hypocrisy of the way a lot of things are run or used to be run.
Yeah.
In that I'm going to ask you to do unnatural things during the 6 weeks while I tell you just the opposite.
Yep.
And I expect you on day one as a new chief to not do that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's confusing. So.
Right. Yeah. That's the stuff that's the most frustrating to me is like they're saying one thing and doing another the entire time and don't see the hypocrisy in it, but the selectees do. And it makes it almost impossible to get them to buy in. And then go ahead.
What year did you get initiated?
2011.
So I went through in 98 and Norm Trotter, retired ITCM. He was an RMC on board Vincent. And what I learned from him in the waning moments I often share, and I won't bore you with the story, but what I realized in Norm was that the best chiefs, the ones who were involved, engaged, and ran things, carried the rest. And yes, I had a guy who poked me in the head and I took a swing at him and he grabbed me mid-swing, threw me over his shoulder, carried me down, threw me in a sack of potatoes in the storeroom below the chief's mess and enlightened me as to what was really happening and why they allowed this asshole to pick on us the way he just felt he'd been picked on the year before and was passing on the pain. But he was a tool in their learning process. And what he pointed out to me, he said, hey, I grew up as an African-American in Alabama and I had an experience that you didn't have.
Yeah.
A lesson I needed to learn as a new chief is not that. But that's not something you understand, that no matter how you're provoked or pushed, you can't do what you just did because you will lose everything.
Yep.
And you won't be able to take care of anybody because you won't be a chief anymore.
God, what a fucking great way to frame that lesson too.
Yeah, and I knew he'd been sitting on that because back then we had 2.5 months. I found out July 6th. So 2.5 months he spent waiting for that moment for me to crack that way. And I was just like, fuck, man. I realized how deep and methodical a good chief's mess can impact sailors in that process of initiation. You pointed out correctly, it's disaggregated. There's 38,000 active and reserve chiefs all around the planet.
Yeah.
Some dipshit one year thought it was smart to take their cohort across 2 state lines during COVID, cut a hole in the ice. He's not from ice country, by the way. Cut a hole in the ice and tell the selectees to jump in as a trust the mess exercise.
Wow.
I was like, as I'm standing with him before he goes to mass with an admiral.
Wow.
I'm like, dude, what were you thinking?
Were you trying to kill people? Like, there's easier ways to do that.
He didn't understand. And, you go below that ice, there's a current. You might not come up. First of all, bad idea, period. But to not realize the danger, the physical danger he put them in.
Yeah.
It blew me away. So.
Yikes. Yeah. And I've been involved in some conversations like that where somebody, not quite that severe, obviously, but like where the good idea fairy comes in for a chief season event. And I'm like, are you out of your fucking mind?
I'll tell you what, the difference between Admiral Richardson having his CSs come back to the house and say, I have no idea what the heck we're doing in initiation, doesn't make any sense to me. And then all of us sort of having to gear up to fight, to explain to the CNO why we do this. And Admiral Gilday, when that thing with the ice happened, he said, oh, Admiral Led's going to hold him accountable? Yes, sir, he sure will. Okay. I had all this stuff.
You were ready to fight back. Yeah, you're like, shit, here we go again.
Yeah, I know you guys will handle it. I was like, oh, that was easy.
Fucking A. All right. I was ready to go to war. The big thing, I'll skip the COVID stuff since we don't have a ton of time. I do want Ariana had a great like premise for a question that I wanted to make sure that we hit because I thought it was really interesting is like from the level of someone like, I mean, high level CMC generally, but also the MCPON, like what kind of advice or perspective could you provide like first class petty officers that are board eligible that are really passionate and want to like help and make change and advocate for people, or especially like young chiefs, like which is where Ariana finds herself. Like, what are some of the things, being someone that's not in the position to like be in conversations to revise programs or make big policy decisions or anything like that? What can those types of leaders do to contribute towards making the things that we've talked about being suboptimal better? You know, like what are some of the things they can do from your perspective to make a significant impact and kind of go home feeling like they've chipped in? You know what I mean? Like having that level of fulfillment.
So, couple things. I'm going to attack it, but in a couple different ways. So, my grandfather, as I said, was a hard hat diver. His boss in Pearl was a guy named Rayner, and he was a BM1 at the time. And he retired as a commander, and he wrote a book called Descent into Darkness, which is a great book. And I went to a book signing with my grandpa, and he introduced me to him. And got to chat with him. He told me who my grandfather was in the book because he doesn't use real names, and told me some stuff my grandfather probably wishes he hadn't. But a point he made to me, because I was I think I was in first class at the time. He said first classes used to run the Navy. Few people became chiefs. We didn't have senior chiefs and master chiefs. He said the first class petty officers were what I think a lot of people would consider chief petty officers, senior chief petty officers, that level of knowledge, depth, and expertise that they counted on to run the Navy. And so the only thing and he said this, God, I wish I could remember how he said it so eloquently, because he said it so eloquently. He said, I'll paraphrase, he just said, the only thing that's changed is the way we empower that cohort. That's all that's changed. They are still capable of doing the things they did, but we trust less, we delegate less, we afford less opportunity to fail, and we don't properly praise and recognize the skill when we truly see it. And that's the only difference that doesn't grow that same people or those same people in those same roles. If you want to make a difference, empower the people below you. And NSW, as an enabler, they gave me opportunities and authorities to do things that as a fleet senior chief, I would not get the opportunity to do. And it used to blow me away. And it was the way I chose to lead was to empower with every last bit of opportunity that I had, because the goodness is in the people that are doing that work, and they'll amaze you with what they can do, especially when they realize they can make a mistake and then come back from it and do amazing things. And I don't mean one of character. I mean, make mistakes that you don't do because you just don't know yet.
Right.
I think empowering is one way. I think that it's easier now more than ever in this day and age because of social media, because of the way that things like email and X and Facebook have flattened the sphere a bit for a good idea to bubble up more quickly. Good people will look at a good idea and be excited that you pushed it forward. Bad people may not, but that doesn't matter. If you have a great idea and you want to affect policy, you can do that as a chief petty officer. Networks. We teach chiefs that networking is our lifeblood. I had people that I never let go of, not even when I was in the MCPON's office. This kid who was an FC2 on a cruiser down in Mayport, I would call him up and say, "Hey, what'd you think of that last thing I sent out?"
God, I love that, dude.
So,
I didn't even see it.
Yeah. And then, I ran into a kid once in the airport, and he was wearing Type 3s, and I see Admiral Burke and some others looking at him. I was like, everybody stand down. I'm going to go have a conversation with him. So I went over and I talked to him. I was like, "Hey, are you even?" And I honestly believed him. He said, I didn't know I couldn't do that.
Most kids don't.
Cool. I saw my girlfriend when I get off the plane, and I was like, "Let's go change," because there's there's so many flag officers here because of where they're going in Tennessee and the flight that's about to happen. You're going to get wrecked. He's like, thanks. So he ducked off and changed. And I called down there and I talked to the CMC and he goes, here's what I got. He showed me an email and it really didn't clearly explain. And we figured out where the breakdown was.
Oh, okay.
But, you never go into a conversation making assumptions. As a more senior CMC, it used to crack me up when I'd visit a ship and the CMC, somebody would say something and they'd start to argue with the sailor. It's like, don't do that right now. I know that sometimes they're going to give you the perspective from what they heard, not what you said. I get it, bro. I've been you. So stand down, hear the sailor out. And if there's anything in the conversation that you can own to make things better, then just go ahead and own it. And then recognize that no one's going to beat you up because your sailor said something crazy. It's all right. I get it. So go easy on your people. In addition to empowering them, sometimes they say things because they just don't understand. And it's good to say, the last year I was in at a lot of initiation exercises, I would say the bad chief says, I don't understand. And because I don't understand, this is bullshit. The good chief says, I don't understand, but I know there's probably a reason. Can you walk me through it? Because I want to understand. I want to be an advocate. And if in the process of explaining it goes, this doesn't make sense, then let's talk about it. Let's have a discussion about it. But don't just make an assumption, then go tell all your friends and not the person with the decision-making authority, this is stupid, it's bullshit. It's like, maybe it's not. Maybe there's something you don't do. So anyway.
I love the filtering it through. Like I would always do like I would seek out like the smoke pit lords, like the E4 mafia, the guys that were always holding court, like amongst the junior enlisted. And you could tell were the more magnetic personalities. I'd go find that kid and sit him down and be like, hey, we're thinking about doing this, poke holes in it for me and tell me what you think. And what am I missing? And just to like get some of the preemptive feedback, because what would happen is we had like the virtual CO suggestion box, and the COB and the CO would make a decision without talking to anybody and put it out as a policy. And then the whole crew would freak out and you'd get inundated with these messages. And then they'd sit there in the chief's mess and read the messages and like laugh about it. And I'm like, this isn't funny. This is like a vitriolic response to a brain dead policy that I told you was brain dead to begin with. But also like there's truth in between the vitriol. Like there's like you were saying earlier, there's pearls to be found within that ET2's article. It's like, okay, they're lashing out, but like within that emotion, there's really good data points for you to reflect on.
He named a senior chief that had worked for me, and when I was talking to Moran, I was like, he's actually right about that dude, because I know him. And he's a true believer in that he believes in what we do, but he used a fucking chainsaw when he should have used a scalpel.
I did a podcast response to that article that was pretty combative, but then I listened to, he was on like a USNI podcast where they kind of got a longer form version of his position. And I'm like, all right, this kid's not as bad as I thought he was. Like, but
he should have pushed him more. A little bit of softball.
And that was something that like I considered going, like trying to get a hold of the kid and seeing if he would come on here, but then I was just kind of like, he's probably just over it at this point because it had been so long since all that. But hey, man, thank you for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I've been looking to get this type of perspective for a long time because like there's so much, like Paul has shared a lot with me from the fleet master chief level and being, like at elbow to elbow with you guys a lot, but it's lonely at the top and only one person can really know what that experience is like and have the perspective that you have from doing that job. And for a long time, I've wanted to not only get that perspective, but also I've had a bunch of discussions with people about humanizing chiefs generally, but like kind of like the response you got to the GDUB thing, like humanizing you, like the person that's the MCPON is a person. It's just a human being doing their fucking best. And it seems like a lot of people forget that because you're so many levels detached from the people in those positions that you just kind of start to think of them as things instead of people. And I don't think it's productive. So I really appreciate you doing it, giving me the time, but also being as candid and open as you've been, man. I really, really appreciate it.
believe me, I as much as you might appreciate it, I appreciate it more.
All right, I hope y'all enjoyed that. I had a really great time talking to him again. Like, it was a lot more candid and open and honest and just fun than I thought it would be. I often expect people at higher levels to be more guarded. And I didn't feel like he was guarded at all. Like, I felt like everything he said was honest. Even the stuff I disagree with him on. Like, I still think the creed is terrible and needs to get revised. And like, and he wasn't ready to go full burn it to the ground like I am. But, and then we talked about some of the Chiefs season stuff, and we talked about a lot of things that even if he didn't fully agree with me on, he was definitely open. And I don't think he was bullshitting me at all. Like, I really came away, with kind of validation of my initial assessment that he was a pretty authentic, honest dude. Like, that was my interpretation of him when he was in the office, like, as the MCPON. And it was kind of interesting too to, like, I actually meant to ask him about specifically about imposter syndrome. But we just never got there because, like, I mean, I could have kept talking to him for another couple hours, but he had to go, and it's already, you know, a typical 3-hour podcast, I think. So, but like it was interesting to hear him kind of allude to that with the, I never thought I'd get there. I thought I was going to retire at this job, and then I thought I was done after this job, and it was always just like it's almost like he accidentally became MCPON just by being a good dude. So I thought it was pretty cool to hear that evolution, like to hear how, like, the path to getting there was kind of this winding road of no expectations and happenstance and some luck and the obvious byproducts of being a good, authentic, trustworthy dude throughout his career. Like, I don't think that I don't think he gave enough, like, credence to that while he was explaining it. Is like, I think a lot of it was just a byproduct of him being a good guy. You know what I mean? Like, it just, you know, in the immortal words of Jeff Bayless, the universe will conspire to help you, you know, like, and I think that might be kind of what happened there. And like, I have a similar, albeit much less, like on a much smaller scale, I have like a very similar experience with, like, how I always talk about how I can't believe I retired a Master Chief. And I really believe that still to this day. Like, I still marvel at, like, how me and my big mouth and my attitude problem didn't result in me retiring as a chief. Like, I thought I had peaked in 2011 when I made chief. I was like, all right, we've arrived, baby. Let's take this out for a spin and see what it can do and have some fun. And I mostly attributed it to luck, and some of that's probably the imposter syndrome creeping in, because, like, I never even really got the time to settle in as a Master Chief. I only wore it for like 8 months before I retired. And so it almost barely felt real, you know, like I sort of was starting to feel like comfortable being called Master Chief and, you know, responding to it and stuff. But, for a dude like him, it was really interesting to hear that, just because, like, I mean, he mentioned it. I think he said he was a chief for like 24 years or some shit. That's like longer than I was, like, in the Navy. It's bananas to think about that there are people that have careers like that. And so it was just really interesting to hear him kind of allude to having imposter syndrome in certain ways and at certain stages of his career development because of who he is. You would think he would not feel that way on the outside looking in, but it's like, we're human. And I think he did. I think that was probably my favorite theme and result of the discussion was, I think, even maybe not even knowing he was doing it, I think he did an outstanding job of humanizing the people that are in those positions. And it's like, because you get a packaged for your consumption glimpse at who these people are, and I think they do themselves a disservice by trying to, like, be professional and not misstep and not say the wrong thing or step on a third rail, like he mentioned. It's like, you have to be willing to take those risks and have honest, open dialogue and be transparent and all those things. And it's like, yeah, it's risky. It's a tightrope act. I get it. But at the same time, it's like no one's gonna trust you in the way that you need them to, or be like responsive to the things that you're putting out if they don't like relate to you. And I don't think they're gonna trust you if they don't relate to you. And it's like they're not gonna relate to you if you behave the way that most people in those positions do. And so that's why I responded so positively when he took over. Even as the interim, I just saw a bunch of things, which I wanted to give him credit for the Office of the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy social media accounts, but he couldn't do it. He's like, that wasn't me. I don't know. Somebody just did that. And but I thought it was great. But he did do things like that were similar in that, like how he was like responding routinely to Facebook messages on the account, like he was, not his PAO, not his MCs, none of that. And he said he made like lifelong friends doing that. Like he's still in touch with a bunch of people that he corresponded with on the Facebook account. So it's just like things like that, behavior like that. I don't know. I think he's a one of one, and I hope we get to see more like him. Like he mentioned emulating Rick West, who I also, he was my favorite MCPON up to that point. Like I'm a big fan of, I'm blanking on the name. He wrote a book called 3 Stars and a Crow. I want to say Jack something. I'm half awake, so forgive me. But I got the book on the shelf somewhere. But I think it might have been Hagen. I want to say it's Hagen, but I don't remember. And I confuse him and another guy too, because I had my brain nuked, so leave me alone. But anyway, I've had some favorites is my point, and up to that point, like Rick West was the easy choice for me because he was a submariner. He's like the only real true blue submariner MCPON. Like there's been others with dolphins, but he's the only one that was like a 100% a submariner. Am I wrong about that? I'd have to look that up too. Like I said, half awake and nuked, but he's the one that, like, he was the recent memory one anyway. And for me, I'm pretty sure he's the only like actual from the submarine force MCPON, but I might be wrong about that. Anyway, and yeah, I just like, he was my favorite up to that point, but I remember being really, really optimistic and kind of like just excited to see how Russ Smith's tenure unfolded. Unfortunately, I ended up retiring at the end there, but anyway, like because I wanted to continue on and see what the future would hold as a CMC and all that stuff, but that's neither here nor there. I really hope everybody enjoyed it. I had a really great time talking to him. You'll probably see him again as something comes up that I feel like he would have the best, insight on or analysis of. And he said he's willing to do that. So you will probably see him again. I also am flirting with the idea of updating some of like the teaching of the creed maybe, or something like that later on. But either way, and yeah, if you want to support us, you can go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast. You can go to the shop button on the website. You can tell it's been a while since I've done this because I'm doing it all backwards. It's been a minute. And then there's a donate button in the upper right hand corner of the website. If you need anything from us, hit us up. don'tgiveupshitpodcast@gmail.com. You can Facebook message us, Don't Give Up Shit Podcast, or you can DM us on Instagram, Reddit, or Discord @dgutspodcast. Keep in mind, I'm not really responsive on social media anymore, so the best way to contact me if you have something you want me to see for real, it's the email. don'tgiveupshitpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, if you can support us, great. But honestly, the best ways beside if you can afford to spend the money, hey, great. That's awesome. I'm still going to be kind of getting back into the Patreon stuff as I spin back up. So the best way right now is probably just share, subscribe, review on all the platforms for all the things. Subscribe on YouTube, share the podcast, tag your friends, share the clips, tag your friends in those, whatever's easiest for you, whatever's most conducive and is the least amount of effort for you, and all that stuff's free as well. It helps a ton. Just get the word out and spread the podcast. So we appreciate it. And that's it. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship. Please hit the like button, drop a comment down below on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel.